Good evening and welcome, everyone. It's 6:30, so I would like to welcome everybody to our special council meeting and planning public meeting for Wednesday, February the 21st. Thank you for being here. It's great to see so many people here tonight and those watching on live stream, and also welcome to council and members of staff. Just a quick reminder, if you have your cell phone with you or any other device, just to turn it on silent so that the meeting's not interrupted. That would be very much appreciated. I would also like to advise you that this meeting is being live streamed and audio and video recorded and shall form part of the record, which will be retained according to the town's retention bylaw. And so for more information about that collection and our bylaw, you can contact the clerk's service. There's two items on our agenda this evening. The first is a planning public meeting with one application being brought forward for information and public consultation purposes only, with no decisions being made here tonight. We're here to listen and ask questions. The second item is a public consultation session regarding the shareholder review of the town of Innisfil's wholly owned utility companies. I'll now ask Councillor Robert Saunders to provide our land acknowledgement statement.
The town of Innisfil acknowledges that Innisfil is situated on treaty lands that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. The town also acknowledges that land is the traditional treaties of the First people of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishwabi people of Beausoleil Island First Nation, Chippewa of Rama First Nation, and Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nations, and we thank them for their generous stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of the Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. I will now go to item 2, which is the approval of the agenda. A mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Fowler and Councillor Ices. All in favor of the agenda as printed and circulated? That is carried. Next, I'll ask if there's any disclosures of pecuniary or conflict of interest from any members of council. Seeing none, we'll go on to the business item, the first being the staff report regarding the zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision for 706 Lockhart Road. The planning application being brought forward tonight concerns a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for 706 Lockhart Road in Innisfil. We'll start with presentations from staff and the consultant on behalf of the applicant. Council may have a few questions or comments, and then we will have opportunity for public consultation. We will hear from members of the public. All speakers will have 5 minutes to ask your questions or express your comments. Then staff or the consultant will respond where possible. If they're not able to respond to your question or comment this evening, when the staff report comes back to council, any of the questions you had that remained unanswered will be addressed in the report. Now, after you've had your 5 minutes, should you need to speak again after we've circled through and everybody's had a turn, you can come back a second time and identify an issue that has maybe not been raised or to receive clarification, and you'll be provided with additional time. That's to make sure everyone has one opportunity, and then we'll go through again if needed. Should any member of the public watching the live stream wish to make a comment, they can email Clerk's Services, and these comments will be provided to council and town staff and taken into consideration before council makes a final decision. You may also be added to the circulation list as an interested party, where you'll be kept updated on any future information regarding the item. The email will be listed on the PowerPoint during the meeting and is also available on tonight's agenda that can be found on the town's website. We'll now hear from the clerk, Patty Toma, on how public notice of this meeting was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. In accordance with the Planning Act, notice for this public meeting was provided to required agencies on January 30th, 2024, and the notice was circulated to all landowners within 120 meters of the subject lands on January 30th, 2024 as well. Corresponding signage was posted on the property on January 30th, 2024, and information and materials respecting the application were posted on the town's Get Involved website for review and commenting.
Thank you. Has any correspondence been received by Clerk Services concerning this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. No pieces of correspondence have been received by the Clerk's office regarding this application. As well, Your Worship, members of the public may provide comment or register their interest regarding this item during this meeting or up until Council makes a decision by contacting the Clerk's office.
Thank you, Ms. Thoma. We'll now hear from Kirsten Morris, Senior Planner, who will provide a high-level summary of the application. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Morris.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of Council, staff, and members of the public, the purpose of this public meeting today is to consider a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for 706 Lockhart Road. Next slide, please. The purpose of the applications is to facilitate a proposed 314-unit residential subdivision consisting of 184 single-detached freehold lots, 130 townhouse land lease lots, and blocks for environmental protection, stormwater management and drainage, a sanitary pump station, future development, an enhanced right-of-way along Lockhart Road, and parkland. Next slide, please. So official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications are required to facilitate the proposed plan of subdivision. The official plan amendment proposes to redesignate the subject lands from retirement residential area, key natural heritage features and key hydrologic features, and residential low density 1 designations to the residential low density 2, key natural heritage features and key hydrologic features, and residential low density 1 designations with a hazard land overlay. Site-specific policies are also proposed through the official plan amendment to permit reverse lot frontage along Lockhart Road, allow a townhouse cluster size greater than 24 units, and to permit a reduced minimum local right-of-way width from 20 meters to 18 meters. The zoning amendment application proposes to rezone the subject lands from open space and environmental protection to a site-specific residential 3 exception zone and a future development exception zone, as well as open space and environmental protection zones for the parkland, stormwater management, drainage, enhanced right-of-way, and environmental protection blocks on the proposed draft plan. The site-specific provisions of the proposed R3 exception zone are detailed in the staff report for this public meeting, DSR-023-24, and will also be presented by the applicant following staff's presentation, but they include site-specific setbacks, townhouse dwelling permissions, and site-specific lot area and lot coverage provisions. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located within the settlement area of Sandy Cove and are approximately 35.5 hectares in area, with about 530 meters of frontage on Lockhart Road, and they're currently vacant. Portions of the subject lands are occupied by natural heritage features, including woodlands, unevaluated wetlands, and a watercourse, and portions of the subject lands are also regulated by the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. Surrounding lands include residential single detached dwellings fronting on Pine Grove Avenue to the north, residential backlots with access onto Woodlands Avenue to the east, Lockhart Road and existing residential lots and the approved and registered Innis Village subdivision to the south, and residential single detached lots to the west fronting on Mason Drive and Henderson Drive. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are currently designated residential low density 1, key natural heritage features and key hydrologic features, and retirement residential area on Schedule B5 to the Town of Innisfil official plan. Permitted uses in the retirement residential area include a variety of housing types geared towards the aging population. Limited recreational, commercial, and service uses are also permitted. The lands are also subject to site-specific policies 10.2.13 and 10.6.12 on Schedule D. 10.2.13 indicates that the northern portion of the lands require a comprehensive plan to be submitted before an application for development will be approved. And policy 10.6.12, which applies to the southern portion of the lands, indicates that this portion that is designated retirement residential area is also permitted to be developed in accordance with the policies of the residential low density 1 designation. However, the proposed townhouses are not permitted in the residential low density 1 designation. Therefore, the official plan amendment proposes to redesignate these lands to residential low density 2 to facilitate the development. Next slide, please. So here is the proposed draft plan, which again consists of 314 residential units with a net density of approximately 23 units per net hectare. The proposed subdivision would include 18-meter wide public roads with 2 accesses from Lockhart Road and would be serviced by municipal sanitary and water. The southern portion of the draft plan consists of proposed land lease townhouses, single detached dwellings, and municipal roads, as well as parkland and a stormwater management block. And the north portion consists of a future development block, which is not proposed to be developed at this time and would be subject to future planning applications and a public process before development could occur on that northern portion. The southern area and northern future development block is separated by a 14.13 hectare environmental protection block occupied by natural heritage features and a watercourse. An enhanced right-of-way block is proposed along the Lockhart Road frontage, separating Lockhart Road from the rear yards of the proposed townhouse units and providing additional landscape buffering along Lockhart Road. And a servicing easement is proposed crossing the environmental protection block for sanitary and water purposes. Next slide, please. The applications will be reviewed by staff for consistency and conformity with applicable provincial, county, and town policies. Staff have highlighted the applicable planning policies that will be reviewed and detailed in a future technical recommendation report to council in staff report DSR-023-24. However, on a high level, the applicable policy documents that will be considered include the provincial policy statement, the provincial growth plan, the County of Simcoe official plan, the Lake Simcoe protection plan, Innisfil's Our Place official plan, and the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So to date, these are the agency comments that staff have received. Hiawatha First Nation has no comments or concerns. Canada Post has no objection and has provided their standard conditions. Bell Canada has no objection and has provided their standard conditions. Huron-Wendat Nation has requested to participate in any archaeological fieldwork. The County of Simcoe has no objection and has provided their waste collection standards. And Hydro One has no comments or concerns. Next slide, please. So for the public comments that we've received to date, these are some of the themes that have been expressed. They include concerns with rear yards backing onto the lots on Mason Drive, natural heritage and environmental impacts, loss of green space, lack of community service and amenities in the area for the increased density, traffic safety concerns, whether the units will be affordable and provide rental units, whether the units will be geared for the aging population, questions about the accessibility of units, and some concerns with the 18-meter road width. Next slide, please. So in summary, the applications propose a mix of 184 single detached dwellings and 130 townhouses, totaling 314 residential units on full municipal services. The proposed development results in an overall density of approximately 23 units per net hectare. The development provides 18-meter wide public roads with 2 accesses from Lockhart Road. A 14.13 hectare environmental protection block separates the southern proposed development from the northern future development block, and the future development block is not proposed to be developed through this application. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, staff will review and consider all comments received and report back to council with a recommendation at a future council meeting. Notice would be provided when the recommendation report would be returning to council for consideration to anyone who requested notification or submitted written correspondence for this public meeting. That also includes any correspondence received on the Town's Get Involved page. and any emails and letters received. If the official plan amendment is adopted by council and approved by the County of Simcoe, and the zoning amendment is approved by council, staff are delegated to approve the draft plan of subdivision along with consolidated draft plan conditions. And then a part lot control exemption would also be required to facilitate separation of the townhouse lots. And next slide, please. Thank you very much. Here's my contact information for any comments or questions to be submitted, and I'm also happy to address any questions or comments this evening as well.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. We'll now hear from Ray Duhamel. He's a partner with Jones Consulting Group Incorporated on behalf of the applicant, who will provide further planning context to this application. Welcome, Mr. Duhamel.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and public. My name is Ray Duhamel with Jones Consulting, and I'm presenting tonight on behalf of Lakehaven North Development Limited, which is a joint venture between Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities and Mattamy Homes Canada. And before I start, there's a few people with us this evening just to help me answer any questions if they're, depending on where the questions go, and just to listen in as well. So in the front, we have Andrew Shogren and Mayor Hazari from Mattamy Homes Canada. And then right behind, we have Tom Patterson and Jeff Marshall from Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities. And we have James Blomers, who's the project engineer from Stantec. Thank you. Could I have the next slide? This slide illustrates, provides context overall from the holdings for Lakehaven. I think everyone's aware that phase one is currently under construction. And the property that is subject to the public meeting this evening is Lakehaven North, which is immediately across the street on Lockhart Road. And then to the west, of course, is a property right now that we're just referring to it as Lakehaven West. And then, of course, there's a piece to the southwest, which is known as Lakehaven South. Next slide, please. So I won't duplicate a lot of the good information that was contained in Mrs. Morris's presentation, but just from a contextual perspective, the property itself is 35.5 hectares, and we have frontage on Lockhart Road of about 530 meters. And as Ms. Morris mentioned, there's back lots to the east, there's existing lots to the west, and there's existing lots to the north, as well as existing lots along Crescent Road and Lily Street, and then the existing development that forms part of phase one. On site itself, the property has, it's currently vacant, and there's a mixture of open space areas, there's natural trails that have just developed over time, and then there's some wooded areas, and there's a water course right through the middle of the site from east to west. Next slide, please. This is a few shots from the area. I'm sure everybody's well familiar, but as we were entering into effectively a visioning exercise and starting the design parameters of what should this site look like from an overall built form perspective, we gave a lot of consideration to what's around the site, how do we integrate into this existing community, and some of the key takeaways, we noticed that there's privately serviced lots in the vicinity, there's lots that have direct frontage on a Lockhart Road that have individual driveways, houses are set back from the road, there's a variety of fences and vegetation buffers between Lockhart Road and the houses. So all of those informed our design approach as we went into the actual visioning exercise, which we actually got into a big room. It was quite a refreshing exercise. All the different team members went into a room and we basically started talking about, before there was an actual design to really lay claim to, we started talking about the vision and the overall approach to the site, which was quite refreshing. So go ahead to the next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. So this is the subdivision that resulted from that work and many iterations throughout the design process to form a proposal that was ultimately sent into staff as a pre-consultation package. We received comments, and then we worked on those, on addressing those comments and making the formal submission that's before you this evening. And the starting point of that design process was, of course, to reflect what the natural heritage features are on the site and the natural hazards. So that's the big green swath right through the middle. And Ms. Morris mentioned that it's 14 hectares. That's almost 40% of the land area is proposed to be protected as part of this process. And it was a lot of work that was involved in defining those limits. That was pre-Bill 23, so there was a lot of work and site visits with the Conservation Authority and a lot of work back and forth to address the natural hazards and natural heritage features on the site and delineate the boundary, the core features, and the buffers that should go along with it. So what we actually have in dark green now is larger than what your, a little bit larger than what your official plan shows, and it's substantially larger than what the environmental protection zoning is that's currently on the lands. So we're looking effectively as part of this application to enlarge the natural heritage piece, both in your official plan and in your zoning bylaw. So that was the first build around, is to make sure we know what's developable and what's not. Then we considered the block to the north. So once we had the envelope for the block to the north and the EP lands around it, we knew that that's an area that's going to be retained by Parkbridge. And the only proposal that's before you today is to effectively maintain its current official plan designation and to zone it future development to reflect the size and the frontage that it has today, and knowing that any development on that land will be figured out in a future application. It's going to come back before you. There'll be another pre-consultation process, another formal submission, another public process to actually propose a development on it. So for the purposes of this exercise, it's a block on the plan of subdivision, and it's intended to be effectively a holding provision so that the development framework for that piece will come along at a future date. So that should give comfort to the landowners to the north, immediately adjacent to that future block, that they know that there will be a process involved in the development of that block at a future period of time. So now we've addressed the P and we've addressed the future development, but we also know there's development, there's existing lots that aren't built on, but there's existing vacant lots to the east. And more, just as importantly or more importantly, there's larger lots to the west side of the site. So what do we do about those? And we looked at making sure that the perimeter lots, and unfortunately from a western lot line where there's more homes, on the western side of the site, there's very few lots actually proposed along that interface. And those lots range from about 6 meters, which is about 20 feet, up to about 10 meters or 30 feet extra in depth. So our standard lot depth is throughout the site is about 29 meters, which is about 95 feet. Add on an additional 6 to 10 meters or 20 to 30 feet on the western lots. So that's the extra depth that's been provided to provide a buffer on those. And we can work with staff, if council were to so approve this application, to provide some additional plantings along that buffer edge. And then on the east side, those lots are also buffered by an EP strip that exists along the east boundary, but those lots are also about 3 to 5 meters deeper than the standard lot size as well. So we've talked about the northern interface and the future block. We've talked about the EP through the middle. We've talked about the interfaces on the west and the east side. Then we spent a great deal of time talking about Lockhart Road and thinking about what's the appropriate streetscape along Lockhart Road for a subdivision of this urban nature. So you're introducing urban, just like phase one was, you're introducing urban development into an area that has certainly to the west and the north, was developed on private septics and wells and is on larger lots. So our consideration along Lockhart was to think about, well, there were a lot of existing lots on Lockhart that have direct driveways out to Lockhart Road. So we thought about that as a design approach, but we quickly discounted that, thinking, well, Lockhart Road is a collector road. It's supposed to funnel traffic to other areas of the town. It wouldn't be appropriate, in our view, from a transportation perspective, a whole bunch of driveways along Lockhart Road. So we thought that from an overall transportation perspective in consultation with staff, to say individual driveways would probably not be the best interface. So we moved on from that approach to then think, well, in Alcona, your common design approach along Innisfil Beach Road, for example, has been to have a window street. So we thought, well, what if we tried looking at a window street along this area, which is, as you know, the street just comes up to the property line, and it's basically you have two parallel asphalt strips. You have Lockhart Road, then you'd have a local street right beside it. And in our viewpoint, when we were considering the generous setbacks to houses on Lockhart and the vegetation buffer on Lockhart, we didn't feel that felt like Sandy Cove. We felt that might have felt more like Alcona, but in the spirit of trying to reflect what Sandy Cove has historically been and trying to integrate our design into what Sandy Cove is, we thought that window streets felt a little more urban than maybe what Sandy Cove really is. So we discounted that approach. So then we went on to the third approach, and we thought, what if we had individual, more north-south streets, rather than an east-west orientation, which is great for solar and energy efficiency, but if we went more north-south, just bring more local streets onto Lockhart Road to have side-facing units onto Lockhart. Would that be better? But then we realized quickly we'd have too many roads connecting to Lockhart, wouldn't meet your transportation guidelines or your TAC manual, and it wasn't good from a transportation perspective overall. So we discounted that approach. So we're cycling through the different design approaches that we're trying to figure out what's the best way to handle Lockhart Road, and throughout this process, communicating with your staff. So we thought, what about reverse lot frontage? And that's fallen out of favor for at least a decade, probably more now, because all you have to do is drive over to Barrie and see arterial roads with 2-meter-high wood fences lining all their arterial roads with your homes in the backyard, and it doesn't provide a great interface from an urban design and a street perspective. So we quickly thought, well, that's not a preferred approach. So we landed on the final, which was a hybrid, is to have homes that are going to be, it's not even reverse lot frontage, but for the purpose of describing it, reverse lotting, but then separate that from the road by an additional 10-meter wide enhanced buffer. So that's going to be an area where there can be a berm, there can be landscaping, there can be fencing, or consistent with what we've seen throughout Sandy Cove with the generous setbacks. And that's basically in the west and part of the east, and there's also a drainage area. So everybody would be set back, and the lot line's an additional 30 feet. Additional 30 feet, yes, from the actual Lockhart Road right-of-way with this enhanced right-of-way block. And we thought that if we have updated and enhanced architecture in those buildings, and we have the enhanced right-of-way strip itself that will provide landscaping, that is actually providing a better context-sensitive development along the frontage of Lockhart. And so in our view, we've given a lot of consideration and years of work to the environmental areas. We've thought about the surrounding developments to the west, to the east, and to the north. Thought about the existing homes that front onto Lockhart on the south side of Lockhart Road, and then tried to build a landscape and a streetscape plan that would work with that. And overall, then we've infilled that into with basically lands south of the EP area with an urban-based built form. It's not on private septics and wells. We're proposing a full municipal services. You're looking at urban development, and the vision for the project was to integrate it into the existing community. And so you see a variety of single detached housing styles. Those will all be freehold in nature. And then you've got a variety of townhouse blocks, both on the east and the west side of the main street entering into the site, and those will be land lease in nature. And sort of on top of all that, we have just aligning our two main entrances with Middlemass and Crescent Road just to the east as the main entry into the site. And then as you drive in the main entrance, right up, you'll see that there's the park. So we're able to provide a view shed into the park, and we benefit from a stormwater management pond right beside it. So there's passive walking opportunities, we hope, around the maintenance road on the storm pond. There's going to be active facilities in the park, which is actually going to supplement the parkland the public parkland that was built in phase 1. And then there's trail networks that will be enhanced into the environmental protection area. So really nice community, kind of community cluster, if you're supposed to build the community around. So that's the overall framework of the site. So I'd like to go, and sorry, I think I mentioned, but I think Ms. Morris already did, but it's 314 overall units overall on the site, and then no units of that was assigned to the future block. Next slide, please. So here's an illustration of the type of built form that's anticipated. So smaller lots with freehold lots that have single car garages, larger lots that have double car garages, and then the townhouse product as an example. So there'll be some architectural detailing that we'll have to deal with as part of as your standard conditions of subdivision approval that you always have in your approvals to make sure that high quality architectural design is implemented. But the owners wanted to convey to you that their intent is to design high quality and sustainable units, all Energy Star design buildings. Next slide, please. It was a whole lot of technical work, and it's a bit tough to read some of the technical work, but I think for the benefit of the public in the audience, they can rest assured that there's a lot of technical staff, both in agencies and at the municipal level, that are currently reviewing all the technical work. They'll be providing us feedback, which we'll have to work through and address if there's any comments that come along. But also all those documents and plans are available, so if you reach out to Ms. Morris, I'm sure she can connect you to provide any member of the public that would like to read any of those documents access to those things. Next slide, please. Very briefly, we provided a detailed planning report, and our opinion this application has regard to the matters of provincial interest under the Planning Act is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan and the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. Next slide. In terms of the county official plan, everyone knows this is in Sandy Cove, of course. I think the most very notable point, though, is that the county, is, I'm sure everyone's aware, passed OPA number 7. It's been sitting at the province now for over a year. That prescribed a minimum greenfield density target of 55 people and jobs per hectare. And I just thought I'm just drawing that specifically to your attention as we move forward in a few more details in the slide. So go ahead, Kevin. Thank you. So Ms. Morris touched on this already, the northern area, other than expanding the EP at the north end, just leaving the north end lands as low density 1, that's what's proposed. And then the south lands, which are currently retirement residential area, is proposed to be designated to low density 2 designation to allow units that are, the actual special policies apply to it already that allow for the low density 1 uses. We would like a little higher density to be able to facilitate the built form that's proposed on the site and not geared entirely to seniors as part of the process, to gear the housing types to seniors, people with families, singles, a much wider variety of buyers. Next slide, please. This is just the official amendment schedule, just implementing exactly what I just described. The north stays the way it is. The EP block is designated, is proposed to be designated in that shape as a key natural heritage feature and key hydrologic feature and a hazard lands overlay. And then it's the southern piece that is specifically the focus of the rezoning, the special provisions and official plan provisions, as I've already described. Next slide. So there's 3 special provisions or policy special provisions that we're requesting as part of the official plan amendment that Ms. Morris described. The first is to permit that reverse lot frontage, and that's the enhanced right-of-way, the extra 30 feet or 10 meters of a buffer block, either between combination of drainage and vegetation and from Lockhart Road. So in the cross section in the top left-hand corner of the screen illustrates that kind of relationship between Lockhart Road and the houses with that extra enhanced right-of-way setback that we're providing. The second request is to reduce your local street right-of-way standard from 20 meters to 18 meters. So what does that mean for if you're actually driving down the street? It means that the road would be half a meter narrower in width. It'd be about 1.5 feet narrower than what the current road would be. And then we're proposing the last point, which is the bottom component of this slide, is to allow for more than 24 townhouse units in a cluster. So that's not in one building, mind you, that's just a cluster of townhouse buildings where there's a lot of synergies to having the land lease lots in the same location. So clustering those rather than dispersing them throughout the plan provides a lot of management and overall benefits to to Parkbridge as part of the land lease component. Okay, next slide. This is the current zoning. You might recall I mentioned that the EP zoning right now is quite small in area and that the actual natural heritage feature in our view is much bigger than that as proposed in the draft plan of subdivision and defined in the natural heritage work that was prepared for this site. So we're proposing to actually enlarge the environmental protection area considerably. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is what the zoning bylaw amendment schedule looks like in its draft form. So again, just establishing the future development block in the north, as I've already described, zoning the much larger environmental protection area throughout the middle part of the plan, zoning the park and the pump station and the stormwater management block as an open space area, and then providing a new set of zone standards. And this is my last slide, so I promise your worship, members of council, I won't keep going on, but establish a new set of zoning provisions for this site. So we've looked at the contextual nature of surrounding it, and then deriving the smaller lots into the more internal spaces on this plan. And we're looking for a very detailed set of requests as it relates to the zoning standards that are urban-based for this site. And I think they've been laid out in the staff report that Ms. Morris provided. They've been explained and justified in the submission materials that have been provided to you. But effectively what this allows is a slight reduction in your right-of-way standard, and the more permissive zoning provisions allows for us to reach, on the southern block, 56 units, people and jobs per hectare. And why did I bring that up? You might remember that OPA 7 said that across your greenfield area you have to hit 55, as an example. So the built form you're seeing in this site is what it takes to get to 55 people and jobs per hectare. And so developing with 50 and 60-foot lots, your density would be substantially below what is anticipated in the growth plan and the county plan. So that concludes my presentation, Your Worship, members of council. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duhamel. I'm going to start by saying that anybody who does want to dive into more information, the staff report that each member of council was circulated is available on our website. You can get a hold of that. And Ms. Morris, how would interested folks get a hold of the technical studies that were listed in one of Mr. Duhamel's slides?
Through you, Madam Mayor, all of these submission documents are available on the town's Get Involved website under the application.
Thank you. I'll now go ask council members if there's any questions. Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few right off the get-go. I'm going to be asking from various people. This is initially listed as a retirement residential land. When was this established under the official plan?
Ms. Morris? I'd have to look further into that. I'm not quite sure when it was established. I don't know if any other, no? Sorry.
Any questions that can't be answered here tonight will be answered in the subsequent staff report that comes forward before any decisions are made. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm going to take that as it's apparently very old. So this has been established long before many of us have been on council. Now, another thing that's been mentioned was during the construction there was talk between in-service and the members, the residents who live on Woodlands, potentially connecting to the street. I haven't heard anything back initially. They were supposed to either go down Lockhart and connect to the base or go through the pumping station, connect to the street. Is there any update on that either way moving forward?
Ms. Morris.
Through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Fowler, I don't have any information on that right now, but I will check with in-services and provide an update on that through the further report.
One more, if I may. Now I'm looking, I went and did my research on the land itself through the Simcoe GIS map. And I see that there's a portion of the environmentally protected lands that are going to be established listed as unevaluated wetlands. Now, it's my understanding that if we do not build it, it does not gain any protection for the future under the provincial policy statement, I believe it is. So they're not recognized as environmentally protected. We have to establish that through the actual building plan. Is that correct?
Ms. Morris.
Through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Fowler, I believe that would be reviewed by the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority in their comments. It is regulated, that wetland, by the Conservation Authority, but no, it is not included in our zoning as being environmentally protected.
So moving forward, if we go through this plan, it will establish it as environmentally protected, correct?
Through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Fowler, on the northern portion near the water course, yes, would be zoned environmental protection.
Okay, and one last one, if I may. The stream that travels through this environmentally protected land, are we enhancing it, or are we just leaving it as is and letting nature take its course, so to speak, or are we doing something to establish the runoff into the lake accordingly so that we don't deal with any flooding issues or concerns with the residents?
Through the mayor to Deputy Mayor Fowler, I might defer to the applicant if the applicant is able to answer that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor Fowler. The EP area is defined within a technical study and working with the Conservation Authority. All the works within that would be regulated. And so if you're talking about stormwater, there's an actual stormwater pond that's proposed on the site that would control quantity and quality runoff from this site. But if you're talking about the actual stream corridor, if it's currently in a degraded state or something, that's not to my knowledge that it is that way in working and talking through with the environmental consultant, but that's part of the technical review. If somebody points out that, and that would be the Conservation Authority's role, if they identify that some area is unstable or there's it's not uncommon, for example, in some environmental protection areas, if there's decaying trees or dead trees in some areas, to have those cleaned out as part of something. So it's possible, I suppose, but I'm not aware that it's a degraded habitat or degraded stream quality area. So, but we're looking for any feedback that the Conservation Authority or staff have on that.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Kind of along those lines, my question is, are you allowed to put that servicing easement through an EP or a wetland area?
Well, I believe, and perhaps, James, you can clarify if anything I'm saying wrong, I believe there would be an environmental assessment process that deals with the pump station and the connection through to the north, and to be able to evaluate what residents within Sandy Cove might be able to flow into that pump station at a future date. So that, to me, is my knowledge. But James, do I need to clarify anything in that?
I'm sorry, we've got people on live stream, so if I could ask you
my
just to answer the mic so that people at home can hear your answer as well. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. James Blommers from Stantec. Yes, just to add, Ray, anything that would happen across the environmental protection area would likely be done through a trenchless method so that there would be no disturbance to the surface features and wetlands and forest and that sort of thing. So just wanted to add that.
Great, thank you.
If I can just ask staff, I know in Innisfil, Leslie Street was prohibitive, stopped from going through a wetland or EP area. So I'm just kind of asking whether or not the reason that it didn't go through was because we weren't allowed to go through that area, and hence Leslie Street was cut in half. So my question is, does that apply to normal infrastructure of a servicing that they want to do here?
Through the mayor to Councillor Waters, not to my knowledge, but I will take that back for further review.
I would appreciate that. Just a couple of...
Can I just, I'm going to break in here because Ms. Morris hasn't been here long enough to know that, and unfortunately I have been. So Leslie Street was to go right through, so the road was not able to go through, but we did put servicing through.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is, a question I've been wanting to ask many people is, what's attainable housing?
What is attainable housing?
Yeah, because the province uses it all the time. We know what affordable housing is, but attainable housing, I'm just kind of asking, what's the definition of that?
Well, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Waters, in planning parlance, attainable housing means anything that is better than where it currently is from a market perspective, and you're moving towards affordability. So that's what in the common planning explanation is. I talk with developers almost daily about affordable housing and the approaches to try to figure out affordable housing. And so attainable housing is not affordable housing. It's one step up on the price point, not down, making it more like less expensive. It's more expensive than what affordable housing is. But it's moving. Housing is about mobility, of choice, right? It's the person. So in this particular development, for example, and I thank you for bringing up the point, because I could have easily brought up, and I should have, that Mattamy Homes, for example, has standard turnkey second suite packages that they can introduce into their development. So a person might buy a slightly larger single detached home that has a second suite instead of buying the townhouse or the land lease product. That provides upward mobility now that townhouse is available to somebody else. Somebody else moves up, and that's what's called upward mobility throughout the housing spectrum. Mm-hmm. So from an attainability perspective, we're always looking for, rather than micro-analyzing exactly what is the definition of affordable, we're always looking at to have attainable housing options. And that starts with providing flexibility on the number of units that are being built. It's looking at our densities, like I'm describing in this plan. If I've been before this council a number of times over my career, I'm trying to think if I would have proposed this plan 20 years ago, I would have got bounced out of the room. And that's the reality of it. We have to look at affordability and attainability, the use of how we use our services, maximizing the tax benefits that you receive and how you spend those dollars. We have to look at community building in a different way. And it's taken us a few generations of urban sprawl to realize that we've got to look at it in a different way. And that's just the reality. And I can say that with confidence because I was responsible for a whole lot of urban sprawl early in my career, and I thought that was the right thing at the time, and it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so we're constantly learning, constantly evolving, but can we achieve attainability? Can we achieve, and the beauty of this plan is they're integrating land lease and freehold all onto municipal streets. It's a rather new approach to create even more attainable housing, Councillor Waters, because if you took a plan that was on private roads, it's two townhouse units, both land lease, but one has on private roads, and there's a swimming pool and some other amenities, and another one that's on a municipal road that's part of this community, this one will be cheaper than this one will be. So if you're looking at the steps towards attainability, that's what we're trying to achieve, is moving towards more attainable housing across the spectrum. You provide more housing options, you provide more housing, period, but you still, I don't think that's a blank check for everybody, and I hope I have built a little credibility over my career to say, we're not just walking in and slapping in apartment buildings and saying this is what we're going to do. We're trying to be context sensitive. So we built from the outside in on this site to recognize that people don't like change. They don't want development around them. We understand that, but can we do it in a context sensitive way? That's what we tried to accomplish. I hope you feel we did a little bit of that in our presentation today.
Thank you. And I'll just make one comment. I do like the hybrid landscaping along Lockhart as opposed to a fence and something else. So it seems to be a little more natural in a break. So I'll congratulate you on that piece. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Zanella?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The 18-meter road,
Yes.
can emergency vehicles, can snowplows and buses fit on the 18-meter road?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Zanella, the answer is yes. And right-of-way standards has been another thing that's changed quite a bit in the last 20 years or so. And when they first started introducing smaller right-of-ways, it was closer to Toronto in the GT area, when the Ontario context. And the number one question that always floated that, they don't get snow like we get. How can you, how can you go with a smaller right-of-way? That was the number one response. I can think of those conversations in 2000 when we're having those same conversations. The difference now is that the right-of-way standards have been perfected and reviewed throughout a lot of municipalities. And the beauty of it, and you're not Barrie, I know that, but you can go to Barrie and see that there's subdivisions that are designed with 18-meter right-of-ways. Yeah, I think your staff have actually gone to review some of, because they've introduced even more progressive items, if progressive is that's the term you want to use, of public laneways that are 12 meters or public laneways that are 9 meters in width. So we're not suggesting to take a deep dive into this subject. We want to take a much smaller step. An 18-meter right-of-way works for garbage trucks and snow plows, and you can go right to Barrie and look and see, and actually drive along the street and see what it looks like. And the difference when you're driving on the road is really this much. It's a meter, it's 1.5 feet of width of the road. That's the only difference. The main difference in the right-of-way standard is in the boulevard. That's the difference in the standard. It's a very small change to the physical road itself. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. So my concern is it's 18 meters, and you're saying that's fine. When it snows and all the snow is on the side of the road, then we lose more space. So now the 18-meter road is going to be, say, 17 meters. Are we still going to be able to accommodate the emergency vehicles, the snow plows?
Through your, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Zanella, the pavement width of your current road is 8.5 meters. The pavement width that we're proposing is 8. So the only difference in the pavement itself is 1.5 feet or half a meter. The boulevard changes from the design of underground services and whatnot, and James would be able to speak to the details if you want to get into the actual provisions of the standard. I've got a cross-section on the one slide if you want to show it. But there's still room for snow to be plowed onto. There's still a sidewalk there's still provisions for a sidewalk. There's still front yard space. So there's still plenty of room for snow, and the road is still going to be plowed. Your plows are going to come through and plow the road, and you're going to prohibit parking overnight like everyone else does, and the road is going to be plowed. So I think it's an important distinction when you say 18-meter right-of-way. 18 meters is not the pavement. The current pavement width right now, if nothing changed, and it stayed at 20 meters. The current pavement is 8.5 meters. We're proposing 8. So that's hopefully provides some the technical context, is that it's not a drastic shift towards, for example, a 12-meter public laneway, which is an actual drastic change that has been introduced in other jurisdictions like Barrie. This is actually a pretty low-hanging fruit movement towards you have less to maintain for yourself for long-term maintenance by the municipality. And on top of that, there's a little cost savings in the construction and a little bit more density that comes with it. That's the advantage of having a slightly smaller right-of-way. Okay.
Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. Last year, members of council were invited to the opening of the Lake Haven Phase 1. So I get a bit of a sense by your presentation what Mattamy Homes is trying to achieve. But saying that, is this development conceptually similar to Lake Haven, and what would be the differences?
Well, I hadn't anticipated that question, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Ices. I think, does any one of our team want to tackle that? I think that every one of these 4 sites is looked at from an individual visioning exercise perspective, but this is not Lake Haven 1, it's Lake Haven North, and contextually, I wasn't involved in the Lake Haven 1 design, but contextually we spent a great deal of time thinking about all the edges of this site. What's happening to the north? What happens with that interface to those lots to the west? How do we improve the Lockhart Road interface? I don't know if that level of visionary work was done as part of the Lake Haven Phase 1, but if you're talking about the built form, then maybe somebody else could speak to whether or not the actual built form will be a similar context. This is Andrew Sjogren from Mattamy Homes.
Evening, Andrew Sjogren from Mattamy. Yeah, I would say it's a bit of a hybrid answer, I would say. I would say in some respects it's largely in keeping with the mix of townhouses and single detached. We are moving away from larger single detached in this development. I think more to, I would say, leaning in on the affordability side of things. So there won't be as many bigger, we have some sort of 43-foot and even larger lots in the south. And then on the townhouses, what we're trying to do, again, leaning in on this affordability, is actually try and find a townhouse product on the land lease side that is actually not just, I would say, not solely, but largely oriented towards seniors. What we're trying to do is find a townhouse product on the land lease that is actually affordable for both seniors and likely new home buyers. So that's what we're trying to do on this one. And then to Ray's point, I think we're being a bit more respective in this one, given its location, of the surrounding neighborhood, right? I would say to the south, it's a bit more of an urban standard subdivision type feel, where this one I think is a bit more as Ray's. I like the way Ray said it, as of kind of planning from the outside in. I think that's what we've done there. So I think that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the other question I was wondering, just to get a sense of density, like the 23 units per hectare, is that similar to what Lake Haven Phase 1 has?
I think this density would be higher a little bit than the Lake Haven Phase 1. I haven't calculated Phase 1, but I would say right away when you have a slightly smaller right-of-way width introduced, and I would think it's comparable, but I think it would be a little higher. I do think that. So that's the low density 2 OPA request.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have like 3 quick questions. You're proposing 4 new developments: Lake Haven North, Lake Haven West, Lake Haven South. Do you have an approximate amount of housing that's going to go in total for all 4 units, all 4 areas?
We haven't done that exercise yet, because we're actually taking it, believe it or not, one step at a time, because we want to know, what do you think of what we're proposing? I hope you at least think that we had well thought out plans and that we took a lot of time and did a lot of technical work to actually get to where we are. But we need to receive your feedback. we need to receive for staff's feedback, we need the technical completion of the work done, and then we're going to build from that. So on a conceptual level, we've thought about general layout patterns, but we haven't lotted out those other sites to know what the kind of yield would be yet. So we want to build one site at a time, and we also purposely didn't want to come to you and say, well, Lake Haven North, that's the blueprint, it's going to be the exact same way in Lake Haven West and Lake Haven South. We need to look at each one of those sites independently, and I really like the team that's been built together on this. I love the ownership and the development focus is to actually look and spend the time to build the sites together and come up with a great design. So I'm really pleased on that end. So sometimes things are much more rushed than they ideally would want to be, and so we spend a great deal of time on that. So I guess the answer is we're going to have to see when we get to the west and the south, but comparisons, in terms of area, those two western sites are a little bit larger in development area, I think, than this site. So there's going to be more units. If we were following all the same basic principles as we're talking about right now, those two sites would be more units than this site would generate.
Sorry, two more fast questions. You have two entrances coming in off of Lockhart. And then how many entrances are on Lake Haven that are proposed to come onto Lockhart? Because that's going to be a lot of traffic going onto a major artery from both entrances on Lockhart.
I believe it's only...
Just let me just finish, because I'm going to have to answer the town for a second. Is our proposed traffic signals going to be prepared on time for these guys?
So, you go first.
Go ahead, Mr. Duhamel, and then we'll go to Ms. Morris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Saunders. The connection point from the south is off of Middlemass, so that's the road connection there. And I'm not aware that there's any others now off the top of me. Is there any? There's only one. That's what I'm hearing. All thumbs up over there. That's what I believe. There's only the one connection point. In terms of timing of signals, I don't know. That might be staff response to that.
Ms. Morris, I think signalization?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Saunders. I think we'd have to go back and look at the timing on the signalization when that's planned to occur, but I'll come back with that in our future report.
Thank you. Is that it, Councillor? Yep.
Can I just ask, I'm not certain that there is signalization there, but are you certain that there is? There is for sure?
Signalization at Lockhart and the 25th Side Road?
Oh, well, that's what I thought you were talking about. Opposite Middlemass. I don't believe that. You're talking about at the 25th. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Drodge.
Thank you, Worship. So with your high-density proposal here for your townhouses, how many parking spaces for each townhouse do you have for cars?
There would be two for every one. There's a garage unit and then the driveway unit as well.
And I noticed in the project that there is no extra parking for visitors anywhere on the site. So are you planning to accommodate for that in the future?
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Drodge, I have developed hundreds of subdivisions in my life, and when you're developing subdivisions on municipal roads, there's no private parking lots. So the parking is on private land in your driveways and in your garage, and then there's street parking when your bylaw would allow street parking to occur. So that's in that context.
So I know in the wintertime you can't do overnight parking, but during the summer or during the week, during the day, can the garbage trucks get by a parked vehicle on either side, or are you only going to specifically have parking on the street on one side? Like, how are you going to navigate that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Drodge. The right-of-way width is 8 meters wide. A garbage truck is nowhere near that width. So think of any urban environment that you drive through that has local streets and they have parking on the street. The snow plows, like sometimes municipalities are moving towards preventing parking on two sides because then it becomes quite narrow. And I've seen scenarios and I've even seen opinion editorials about, well, there's parking on both sides of a local street, how does something get through? So that's quite common in most urban areas. I think controlling parking on one side would probably address that, but certainly you can still get through on an 8-meter ride. Like we're only talking about the width adjustment of this different. So I guess the question is, can you drive an ambulance down a local street in Alcona? I would suspect the answer is it's the exact same as the answer is going to be here. Go drive in Alcona, and that's what this street's going to look like, because you're not going to be able to see the difference in 1.5 feet.
Just to clarify, when you're talking roadway pavement, 8.5 meters and 8 meters, you're coming right to a curb, right? Where most of the roads in Alcona have a shoulder, and most of the people park on the shoulder, which creates the space. But in that particular situation, at 8 meters wide, it's a curb. So it's, your whole vehicle is on the 8 meters, if I'm correct.
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Drudge, absolutely. Just like the areas in Alcona that have barrier curbs that are newer. We're not, like, there's older areas of Alcona and there's barrier curbs in Alcona. And so just like there's barrier curbs in almost every urban environment that I'm aware of. And that's, people park on the road, and then you have to decide if you're going to allow on-street parking and when you're going to allow on-street parking. And fortunately, that's your control, which is the best part of it all. If people are complaining that parking is rampant and it's out of control, change the parking provisions. It's your road, thankfully, and that you have the control to be able to do that.
Anything else, Councillor Drudge?
No, that's good, thanks.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. Just one question that was raised when I think Andrew was up at the mic. He mentioned that the townhouses target audience was going to be seniors. So I was incorrect what I heard there?
Sorry, yeah, for clarity, I would say that the ones that are in the current subdivision that we're building were more targeted towards the standard senior market for land lease, but Parkbridge is historically targeted. But this new subdivision and the future ones is actually the intended target is to actually be much broader to first-time home buyers, move-up home buyers, whoever it might be. It's really, the intention is to try and attract all demographics of home buyers.
Okay, I want some sort of clarification. I thought I did hear seniors,
It was
townhouses
seniors,
together.
so sorry, I mean, seniors are certainly will remain a target
Yeah.
buyer, but we're trying to broaden that sort of horizon to virtually every demographic there is.
Yeah, because most seniors are looking for single-floor units where there are no stairs in them. So when you said townhouse, I thought, unless they have elevators, which I know townhouses in Toronto do.
Yeah.
I wanted to get a little more precise on that.
Yeah, correct.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. I just had a couple of quick questions. Understanding that the future development block isn't part of this application, can you tell me, do you have an easement from Pine Grove to that, or is that future development block landlocked?
I believe, Your Worship, that there's 2 road stubs that extend Beach and there you go. That already exists, that go right down to the north boundary of that north block. And the appropriateness of connecting to those and what kind of traffic it would generate, what built form, those are things you will want to know and that the developer is going to have to analyze as part of any application.
Thank you. And the one slide you showed had the buffer surrounding the site plan, particularly on Lockhart. So is that naturalized, or is that going to be something, is that going to be a maintenance issue with the town, or is that intended to be a naturalized buffer on Lockhart?
Well, good question, Your Worship. I think there's plenty of flexibility. If we're talking about the enhanced right-of-way block along Lockhart Street, there is a drainage portion east of the main right-of-way that's going into Street A. There's a drainage area that will have to be maintained, of course, because that's a drainage corridor taking southern drainage. But the intent or thought process was to have plantings and some trees and shrubs and a fence and a berm. But that could be very naturalized as part of, to have the lowest maintenance. Could have low, drought-resistant native vegetation. It could have, low-growth materials that don't require much maintenance. So I think as part of I would expect at the very minimum a condition of draft plan approval, if you were to so conclude that you would like to see this project move forward, is an actual design of that enhanced right-of-way, rather than just a cross-section, but actual landscaping detail. And if it's council's direction or staff's direction or otherwise that you'd like to see a more naturalized enhanced right-of-way to minimize maintenance cost, which I would understand, that could be built into that detailed design provision for the landscape.
Thank you. If I remember correctly, on Mason, there were 4 impacted lots that would be backing onto the development where the other ones are backing onto EP land. But there was no, you said something about they were extra deep lots, but I didn't see a buffering on those 4 lots on Mason.
Yeah, sir, through you two, not through to you two, but Your Worship, and what we did was just enlarge, in the east side of the plan, there's an actual environmental protection block. There's actually a feature that we're buffering there. On the west side of the plan at the bottom, closer we get to Lockhart, there's no natural heritage feature there. But what we did do is we extended those lot depths by 6 to 10 meters. And what we can do is introduce plantings as part of the actual detailed design. And that could be a draft plan condition as well, and would be appropriate to do so.
2 more quick ones. I know people have been very patient, then it'll be your turn. So the park block and the stormwater block, are they part of the EP land, or is that park block developable land that is, designated as parkland?
Your Worship, both the park block, the pump station area block, and the stormwater block are on developable land. So our first takeaway was, where's the core features we have to protect? Where are any natural hazards, floodplain, anything associated with the stream? Where's that limit? Then where's the buffer on top of that? And then we start designing around that. So the park and the pump station and the storm pond are on developable land. But they're nicely suited right there to provide the connection points.
Thank you. My last question, and it's one I ask at every planning public meeting, is there a lot of fill that needs to be brought into this site?
Good question. I'm going to look to James to answer that one. Come on over, James. I want to say, come on down, but that's...
Thank you. To answer your question, Mayor, in Innisfil, I think probably everyone's familiar that there's fairly high groundwater situation. In order to meet the town engineering design standards and whatnot, we do need to keep those basements of the units up above the groundwater. So yes, we will need to bring fill into the site.
Could we please have, when we get the staff report back, an estimated number of cubic meters of soil that's going to be brought in? I'm not going to, count trucks or anything, but an approximate amount, that would be great. Thank you. Deputy, one final question, and then we're going to go to the public. They've been very patient.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's actually a comment on the last question you asked. Previously, before they started building homes in south of Lockhart, there was an issue where they had too much fill, as I recall. And I spoke with Parkbridge when they were talking about moving it up into that area as storage for a further point in time. So my understanding is that there was an excess in the previous development, so there's not a large amount that should be transported up as opposed to it being bare.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Duhamel. We'll now hear from members of the public who have questions regarding this item or comments. I understand, and I'll confirm with the clerk, that no one has registered to speak virtually.
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
So I'll call on those in attendance here at Town Council to come forward to the podium, and please state your name for the record. As a reminder, so that everybody has an opportunity, I'm going to ask you to keep your first comments to 5 minutes, and then you can return after everyone's had an opportunity. And please, I hate cutting people off, so please, if you wouldn't mind keeping it to around 5 minutes. And yes, please, anybody, question, comment, please come to the podium. It's always hardest to go first. Please come forward. Oh, one moment, Madam Clerk.
Sorry, Your Worship, we do have pre-registered speakers. When we have their names on the screen, if they would like to start in that order, and then any other persons in the chamber who would like to speak could follow up after.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So this gentleman's halfway to the mic, so you go first, and then we'll call on Enrique Soisa.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Councillors, my name is Rick Lane. My wife and I live on Woodlands Avenue. We own the property that backs onto this development, probably 240 feet north of Lockhart. So beautiful property, we love it here. The issue in the area is drainage. And we've known that this golf course was going to be developed. It's taken a long time to get here, but it's here. Our concern continues to be with drainage. So there's Block 215 that I saw on the proposed plan that says drainage. And my question with the whole project in particular, but that block in particular, is where is that water going to drain to? Because in the spring, snow melts and everything else, we get a lot of water in the area. And I want to know, particularly in view of the last comment, there's fill to be brought in so that basements can be put in the new homes and all of that. We weren't able to put in a basement in our house because of the same reason, but we want to know reasonably that the drainage situation is certainly not going to be worse and hopefully is going to be materially improved with what's being proposed here in this development.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Can anyone answer Mr. Lane's question here now? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi again, Mayor. So totally legitimate concern and understand why you're asking that. So basically the drainage strategy for this site, and it'd be easier with a plan up on the screen, but all of the drainage from the proposed development will be routed to the stormwater management pond. From there, we'll be following the town criteria and Conservation Authority guidelines for how much quantity and quality control we need to be doing within the stormwater management pond. We'll be holding a certain volume of water in accordance with those criterias and policies, and then there will be a proposed outlet from that stormwater pond which will direct the controlled water into the Sandy Cove Creek. So I hope that answers the question.
Just not clear on the Block 215, which is at the southeast corner of the development. The stormwater management pond is further north. But where is that drainage at the southeast corner intended to go? And like I was surprised to see a relatively small block identified simply as drainage.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I don't have the block numbers memorized. So yeah, could we pull up the map? Is that possible?
Deputy Clerk, are we able to pull up the map so we can look at the block numbers? That should be it right there.
That's right here.
Drainage, okay.
That little
right there.
corner is Block 215.
This one.
I see. So this block is, this block is actually part of the Lockhart Road Improvement Project, where I believe this is a approved project. It was necessitated as part of the Phase 1 development, and there are some drainage improvements and whatnot with culverts, and this is for, I believe this block is for regional storm event, which is a very, very large storm event, and it's just to allow space in case of a larger storm. I don't think it would be brought into action in many of the storm events that happen from a day-to-day basis, all the way from a 1-year storm, 2-year, 25, all the way up to 100. It's more of a provision, and there was an existing drainage pattern, which is why that's being maintained. Now, those are my understanding from working in the area. That project was done by a different engineering consultant and with the town, and the town reviewed it and whatnot, and that's my high level understanding of it. I would expect that it would be an improvement.
Thank you. Mr. Lane, we'll make sure that the staff report addresses that, and we specifically tell you what 215 is and when that work is going to be done. Thank you. So next is... Thank you. Next is Enrique Sousa. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, and esteemed council and staff. Enrique Soisa, I am a resident at Lockhart and 25th Side Road. I do have some concerns about the development. I'm not against the development, but my concerns are that from hearing tonight, it seems that these phases are each being done step by step individually without any real holistic approach to the entire community. As a resident in the community, I'm seeing that, again, Lake Haven 1 has already commenced, and we've had some residents already come in. And we're seeing further phases of development happening surrounding the existing community. The development is we're being told that is going to increase the density compared to the existing community, which seems fine and applicable for the given needs of the growing community. But furthermore, they're already admitting that they're adding concepts to add even more density to the existing homes, given they have possible suites or nanny suites or grandmother suites already. So they're already including the fact that they're going to possibly increase the density even further by nature of how they're building these homes. My concerns are with the community is that where is the actual integration with the rest of the community? Because I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing a barrier, naturalization, a berm being created to block the development to the rest of the community there on Lockhart. The past Lake Haven development already has, similarly, when I look at the past plan there along 25th Side Road, they're doing something similar with only having the backs of the commercial development onto 25th Side Road, where that, again, doesn't seem to integrate to the community. That's, again, we're seeing their backs. As a resident on that street, I'm now going to be supposedly seeing a brick wall, even though that area has been designated as downtown Sandy Cove. I think that's incongruous with what is being developed. That is not a downtown. If I'm looking at the back of a wall, if residents will have to drive into parking lots or drive from their homes there in phase 2 or phase 3 to get access to the commercial strips, that is not a downtown. That is a more urban sprawl. That is a strip plaza. That's not a community. I would love to see how it can integrate with the rest of the community in Sandy Cove, but I don't see that. I question where these 4 developments and all the residents will live, and I don't mean where their domiciles will be, is where are they going to live in the community? I don't see community center. I don't see houses of worship. I only see the potential for a few strip plazas there, where again, the residents on the rest of the street and neighbors driving by will only stare at their backs and have to drive into a parking lot that has more real estate dedicated to cars than to the community. So that is my concern overall, is where does that fit in with the rest of the community? Where do these developments fit in with the orbit? Because I remember a few years ago, the orbit was all the talk, but I don't hear at all how this connects with the rest of the master plan of Innisfil. And again, as residents, our concerns are going to be, how is this going to impact our quality of life? Not that we're the only residents there, but it seems that there is a distinction being made between these developments and the rest of the community, with right-of-way, with berms being built, as opposed to, let's consider the actual residents who live there. How do they integrate? How does this phase 1 integrate with Lake Haven South, Lake Haven West, et cetera? Because there are no driveways right now. That's planned, but again, the improvements to 25th Side Road aren't due for another 2 years, as far as I can recall, based on the master plan as well. So we have new residents already living in Lake Haven, and they can't walk anywhere. They can't shop anywhere. There's nowhere for their children to go and play just yet. And we're already now adding new developments into the equation without considering the greater impacts to the residences in terms of their quality of life.
Thank you very much for your comments. Much appreciated. Next is Elizabeth, is it Robbins?
I'm obviously not Elizabeth Robbins. I'm her son, Nick. I'm Nicholas Robbins. We lived on Pine Grove, 685 Pine Grove for the last 40 years. And we back immediately onto this. We're actually on one of the sections that's going to be converted to environmental protection. I like to see the environmental protection. It looks like a good-sized block. The worry that I have here is, he talks about the standard size of the lots in here, the standard, but his standard is based on a self-contained unit here. He talks about the standard size being, 35 feet, let's say, but the average in all of the surrounding area is around 70-foot wide lots. Like the last gentleman was saying, how does this, when you speak about the context in the neighborhood, the context, you're still speaking in a self-contained unit. You're not speaking about the context of what our lives are like in this area. That extra space actually does translate to a different way of life in our area, that we have that extra space, that we have these extra green spaces that are built in, not just in there's the green space and here's our space, it's built into the neighborhood. And I just don't see any allowance for that in this. We're looking at a lot of these things, a lot of these spaces, the largest are 35 feet, most of them are under 20. And it's just completely out of line with what we live with on our day-to-day in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Next is Jesse Ainsworth. Welcome.
Thank you. It's actually Jesse Aerosmith, but that was close, so thank you. Yeah, I've lived on Pine Grove Avenue for 14 years, and I had to buy a car to live here. There's no public transport, so if you're going to have 314 units, like 184 detached, sure. But people in the townhouses who can only have 2 cars, if that, because you don't keep things in your garage, like we all keep things in our garage. What about public transportation? Where are these people going to work? Like you say, like where are these people going to live? Like, I appreciate the 40% green space. I appreciate the environmental protected area, but I don't think that's enough that's protected. Like, what about all the endangered species that live back there? Like, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of animals that are endangered. There's bees, butterflies, like the warblers, the woodpeckers, all these animals, where are they going to go? Like, Lake Haven is right across the road. There are already people living there, and like you say, they can't walk anywhere, right? I don't know. I don't think this is feasible. Like, if you want to put the 184 single detached units in there, I think that's a reasonable number. I'm not opposed to this development entirely. I'm just opposed to doing it for the money and not with the consideration of the community. And all those animals and trees and endangered grasses that are in there are part of our community too. So, and I was looking at, you wanted to rezone to a residential 3 exception. That's apartment buildings, that's condos, and I appreciate that we don't see any of that in here yet, but that future development block scares me. Honestly, it's just really scary, right? I feel like there are more important things, like our well, like our septic. We love our well, we don't want to have to go to city water, and if the people a kilometer away from us are going to go to city water, don't make us give up our well. We don't want that, and I don't see how you can develop all of this a kilometer away from us and not mess with our water table. I don't think it's possible. And what about our beach, our little beach at the end of Mapleview? Like 14 years ago, we could ride our bikes down to the beach anytime, and there was room for us, where now we can't go there on weekends in the summer. We can't. There's nowhere to park a bike right now. So what's going to happen when you've got another 314 units right there? Where are they going to go? I don't know. I just don't think there's enough room for all of this.
Thank you, Ms. Aerosmith, for your comments. Marina Bernekov.
Good evening, it's Marina Branikov. Okay, so I have a few questions and concerns. First off, I just moved into the area myself a little over a year ago, and I chose that neighborhood because it didn't have kind of the cookie cutter feel of a subdivision. When you walk down the street, there's mature trees, there's large lots. Each house is pretty much different. And I wonder when the subdivision comes in, what that will do to the property value of my own house. You guys had mentioned attainable and affordable housing. Those words were put in there. So I wonder what the price point of these units would possibly be and how that would affect my house. Also, a big concern is right now it's a quaint, cozy, quiet neighborhood with all these units coming in, the different phases that you guys have planned. The traffic, I'm wondering, you know, in the morning with the morning commutes and then in the evening when everybody's coming home, what that's going to look like driving in and out of each neighborhood and on the 25th side road, as well as what the foot traffic would then increase to, you know, with people walking, they have to walk their dogs or, you know, just leisurely strolls. My lot is actually on Pine Grove, which is directly beside Cove. And right now that's a vacant lot with trees. So I'm pretty concerned about how that is going to be handled and when the north development is going to be kind of set into motion. You guys had mentioned that, and I do appreciate that the environmental protected area, you guys have expanded on that. I heard some mention of trails going in, so I wondered how that would be implemented, if it would be manufactured or just using the natural ones that are currently there. And then also the construction noise. This sounds like it's going to be going on for quite some time, and how that will affect our daily lives and, you know, living, and how long that's going to go on. So those are kind of my questions, comments, and concerns. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for being here, Marina, and I apologize for mispronouncing everyone's names. And you'll see that both clerks and Mr. Duhamel are taking notes ferociously. So we'll make sure that those are addressed in the staff report. And next on the list is Ron Pettit.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I have a few problems with this development. First off, it's much higher density than currently exists. And as everybody knows, there are no amenities in this area. If you want to work, you have to drive. If you want to go get groceries, you have to drive. There is literally nothing you can do in this area without a car. So we're talking about like how many cars bringing how many pounds of road sand and salt back from them from wherever they go into an environmentally protected area. What about all the roads that need to be sanded and salted around there too? It's all going to end up in the lake or in Sandy Cove Creek. I don't know if anyone actually takes the time to walk the trails by Sandy Cove Creek, but if you do, you would know that it's home to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of minnows every spring. Those minnows come in, the brook trout eat those minnows, the swans are eating those minnows, they make their way back out to Lake Simcoe. If that creek gets salted, what happens to all the minnows? They're not going to survive being salted by a bunch of road salt and other contaminants that this development's likely going to bring in. I have 3 kids. Over the last 5 years, it's gotten to where I can't even walk my kids to the lake on Lockhart Road because of the construction traffic. It's ridiculous. Between the way people drive on that road, 80 kilometers an hour getting down to the lake, all the dump trucks, everything. It's destroyed our ability to go and use the lake unless we want to walk down like on an evening or maybe a weekend, but you literally can't use that road. It's too dangerous. 2 cars are coming, nobody has the common sense to slow down and give you the right of way anymore. They just buzz you as close as they can. You try to ride a bike down there, good luck. And then we're going to introduce that much density. I don't see how it works. If you were talking about a retirement residence, which is what this used to be zoned for, that's one thing. Retired people are not likely to be traveling every single day for work, taking their kids to school and commuting in and out. You're talking about dumping hundreds of extra cars into a small pocket of town on top of the other developments that these guys want to put in the same area. I don't see how it works. The council is also, or should be aware that there have been ongoing water shortages when groundwater gets pumped out of the developments around our neighborhood, and our neighborhood is full of shallow wells, and everybody knows that. It's marked on those studies. And those studies also say that there's a high risk because of all of the groundwater pumping that there's going to be problems with the wells. So what's the plan there? Do we have a plan? Is Parkbridge going to come drill us all wells? Yeah, guys, you're going to drill us all wells when you run our water out by developing all this land? We rely on that green space to filter the water for our wells as well, and we're going to end up with a whole bunch of sand around like we have in Parkbridge South now. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. So that's everybody that's on the list, but anyone who is here who would like to come forward, please do so. Please.
Hello. Thank you, Mayor Dolan and members of council. I actually called and asked to be put on to speak, and the planning department said they would notify the clerk, but it wasn't done. So I actually have something to say, and I also have a list of questions. So if I could maybe just speak a little, and then I'll let you all finish, and then maybe I could save the questions for my second round.
Absolutely. If you want to just state your name for the record, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Louis Resnick. I live to the, if you could put up the map again, it would be really helpful for when I speak for everybody in council, I believe. But anyways, I live to the east of the development on Woodlands Avenue. I've been a resident there for 45 years, almost 45 years. My family also has a couple houses on Woodlands Avenue. So we've known the area for quite a bit of time, so what I think I'm speaking about, we've had some interaction with the neighbors, with in-services, and with the town. And I think the two main points I'd like to make are there's very little communication between the town, in-services, the residents, and the developer. This doesn't go on in urban areas, and this is what's happening in our areas, becoming urbanized. And I'm not here personally to complain about the densities and whatever. Today there's a shortage of housing and things like that, and there's people more versed than I am to speak to that. However, this is an infill site, and the town's policy on infill sites is to have like should be like. So in other words, the houses on Mason Avenue, although there's only 4 backyards there, you're going to put 10 or 20 townhouses or single houses there. You're going to give those lots 3 or 4 foot depth extra, or 10-foot depth. But the person on Mason Avenue is now going to have 6 people in their backyard instead of 1. That's not like for like, and that's not what Innisfil has in their planning act or planning draft plan, whatever. And the same on Lockhart. Lockhart is single-family residential, large lots. Crescent Avenue. On the south side, on Lake Haven, they respected that, and you have, and I can't say for sure because it's not finished, but it seems to be more respected than it has been on this plan. You have an enhanced, what you call an enhanced right-of-way, and in the couple questions I've heard today, an enhanced right-of-way is going to have drainage, it's going to have in-services, new expanded ditches, it's going to have drainage to help Mr. Lane, who couldn't have a basement, but these houses are going to be built anyways. This hasn't been put together well enough, I don't believe. If they want to do the townhouses, they should put them inside, not surrounding what are all large lot single-family homes. Anyways, what I'd like to speak to is bigger issues, which are what you've been hearing from some of the residents. In the Lake Haven South development, had the same problem. When they dewatered, everybody's wells dried up. As it is now, we have trouble with we have had issues with wells, but I have both dug wells and drilled wells. I've been fortunate enough and not had too many issues, but neighbors have. But our septic systems are what are the big problem. There is so much water in that area. That creek, where the engineer said they're going to divert the water, all these houses going over the environmental protection lands and into the retention pond. Well, they screwed it up on the south side to the point that they had to put the big ditches on Lockhart, and they had to build a second retention pond. I haven't looked at yet the sizes of these ponds and whatever, but if you're bringing in more fill and whatever, there's just no way. My backyards, you can come over, you're all welcome to. They're eroding from the water in the creek. There's just so much of it all the time. And I can go on and on, but I'm only going to get 5 minutes. So I just think there has to be more work done. I'm just going to bring up one real big point, and if they could speak to it today, just so we can all hear this. And you didn't put the map up, but there's that easement which a couple people have alluded to about the service easement going to the future development lands. We were wanting or requesting to have a similar easement through to our lands on the on Lake Simcoe. When they were doing the improvements on Lockhart, we engaged with, spent money on both planners and engineers, and engaged with In-Services to talk about what was happening on Lockhart, because it was a golden opportunity to get our septic tanks offline, and which is part of the Lake Simcoe Conservation Protection Plan. Anyways, they're doing this here. All they have to do is give us a catch basin that we could pump into. And I mean, there's things that have to be done with it, but all these issues can be overcome. And we've discussed it both with the town and within services, but yet it's not shown on this plan. And they didn't give the right answer when somebody asked the question about the service easement going over to the northern development. The truth of it is, as I understand it, and I did speak, there was an environmental assessment done where the pumping station was to go and why it was to go where it was and the capacities in it. The reason it is where it is, I am told, is it's the closest place to the creek so that it could go under, the pipes can go under the creek to do the northern land. And so there is a reason for it there, why it's elongated for the pumping station. A pumping station should be square, so I don't know what other rationale there is for that. But the point that I was trying to make is it was a golden opportunity to take a bunch of septic tanks off the system and put them online, and it's not even addressed here. So they want to urbanize, but they don't want to urbanize anybody else. They want to urbanize their little land and leave Lockhart, give us well, I'm going to ask the question, what is an enhanced right-of-way? Who's going to own it? Who's going to maintain it? And then this, the environmental protection that runs along the east side, is that where neighbors are going to throw their lawn clippings because you can't get a lawnmower between their houses? And that's what we're going to get for environmental protection? Are there any drainage swales? Are there any pipes? Are there anything on those environmental protection lands? And who's going to maintain those? And who's going to own those? Does that go to the county, to the town? Or does that later go towards densities? I don't know. And again, I'm not trying, I want the town to grow. I'm so proud of what I've seen over the 40 years I've been here, and mindful and respectful. And I do develop. We've developed in Innisfil and whatever. So let them make money, but let them put something back into the community and respect the town for what it is. So I probably missed about 10 of my points, but I'm very happy to send them into planning staff. She was very, sorry, I'm terrible with names, very good to speak to, and I will send in all the questions. But insofar as the questions I'd like to raise today, I'd like to come back afterwards if I may.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. Yes, you did exceed your, now the one thing I would say though, however, is that future easement and that future development is not part of this application. So I'm not sure whether that part can be addressed, but I know Ms. Harris will do her best. So next, would like to come up and say a few words, please? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is John McPhee. I live off of Pine Grove. And I'd like to compliment the fellow from Jones Consulting. He did a wonderful presentation. I think if Mattamy Homes decided to send him to Alaska, he could sell ice to the Eskimos. However, if you take a drive along Mason Drive, and the homes back there that border on this very private yards, do these developers have to put a fence up back there when this is developed? And are these 2- or 3-story buildings that are going to go down and look on their property like they're next door to a high-rise? Like you can't develop something and take something away from the people that are already there. I know there's progress, we can't stop it, but let's do it responsibly. Let the people keep their property the way it is or damn close to it. Secondly, I'd like to point out the environmental protection part of Lovers Creek. There's everything back there you can think of. There's grouse, there's rabbits, there's coyotes, and most important, the most protected animal in Canada, the beaver, lives there. I've been involved with different situations where we've come across the beaver, and you're doing a building. You can't move them, you can't shoot them, you can't trap them, you can't touch his environment. So if you're going to change this so we can put a few condos there and the kids can go out and play with the beavers, it ain't going to work. We all know what's happened to our environment, and we all make excuses. Well, this little bit won't hurt if we just develop this. It will. It will, because we're all doing it. And we got to take responsibility. 14 years ago, when I built a shop at the back of my property off Pine Grove, which borders on this future development. And when I phoned Innisfil for a permit, they said I had 2 little trees to take down on the property for the driveway. They were about 4 inches round and 10 feet high. And when I phoned for the permit, they said, oh, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. We don't know if we can give you a permit because you might be in what we call Tornado Alley. Hey, 2 trees. The trees these guys are going to take down, if there is a Tornado Alley, we had one at Prince William Way. That's not far away. So if taking those trees down can change the course of a tornado coming through, we better look at it, because they're taking down a hell of a lot more than 2 trees. And I just think we should really look at this thing a lot closer before, especially the future one. And how close, what's the variance on the creek? How close can they come with a road? How close can they come with a building? And all that stuff's got to be taken into consideration. You can't just, okay, let's build some houses and get the tax dollar. I know, I figured it out. Innisfil's got the power, they got the lines going right through to Friday Harbor. But we don't want to pay to put those lines down Pine Grove and down. We want the developer to pay, and this is how we do it. But there's got to be other developments or other ways if it's going to interfere too much with the environment. And like the fella said, this is going to drain the wells. This will drain the wells. Let's not kid ourselves. This is, that happened when they did it on the other side of Pine Grove. And what are they talking here? Total 600 homes? 5 people to a home? 3,000 people? 1,200 cars? And that's just that side of Lockhart. They're already doing the other side, probably the same thing again. That's a lot of people. I think right now the population of Sandy Cove area is about 1,500, 2,000 people. You're going to triple it. And it's not all going to be good people that move here. It's not all going to be good neighbors. Crime will climb. Bad neighbors will come. Speeding cars will come. So let's take it all into consideration, not just the good stuff. Let's look at what can go wrong here and deal with that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. Anyone else that would like to speak, please come forward. Welcome.
Edith Ann Shantz, Mason Drive. And it's not that I like to speak, but I feel I should speak. I don't know if anybody watched that show by Steve Paikin on, what is it, CT? No, whatever it is, TVO. Anyway, he had this whole show about the Great Lakes, and he included Lake Simcoe in terms of building around the edges of lakes and how that shouldn't happen, and they should leave the bushes and the woodlands and the biodiversity and, you know, how it keeps the air clean, and it's sort of, he didn't say this, but for me, I would say it's a gift of hope to the future generations. Guy with the 3 kids, I get it. So I look out my back window from, you know, Mason, and I see 9 wild turkeys walk by. I go out and I see the snakes. I'm not keen on snakes, but, you know, there's the rabbits and there's all kinds of stuff back there and all kinds of birds, owls, you know, different things that you're not going to see. Beautiful. You talk about beautiful homes. They are beautiful, but nothing beats a beautiful tree or a beautiful bird. And I don't know why we're not even taking seriously the fact that we shouldn't be building right by our lakes. And I was thinking about it last night. I was thinking, you know, if you line up all these people that are going to live here and on the other side of Lockhart, you go down to the end of Lockhart. In fact, that's how I found out about this meeting. There was a sign. I was going for a walk. There was a sign face down, and I was like, I'd walked through the woods. What's that sign? Well, I find out there was this development being planned. Nobody would have seen that sign. It was face down on the ground. But anyway, you line up all the people. Everybody would have to walk single file down to the end of Lockhart to see Lake Haven. And then they'd have to turn around like this to walk about the width of the table and then turn back. And that's the only way you'd get a view of the lake. You can't even set up a lawn chair down there. It's such a small area. And one huge cottage has taken the beach, if there was a beach, I mean the lakefront, and there's nothing there for this wonderful concept of Lake Haven. And I don't know what this one's being called. I don't know if it's Lake Haven too, but yeah, Lake Haven North. I just totally feel that, you know, that woodland should be preserved. And I'm surprised that we're even contemplating, you know, destroying land by our lake. So anyway, it's, you know, we'll have our concrete ghetto and, but no, it's not that we're going to have it. Actually, I was thinking about the last time I ever went to a meeting like this. It was in the city of Toronto, and there was a tree, a 200-year-old tree, by the way, and all the people came out to talk about this 200-year-old tree. Guess what? That lot has not been developed. They were going to do a big strip mall and whatever. No, the people spoke, and something happened. Nothing happened. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Anyone else who'd like to speak, please come forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Amy Dewar. I live on the corner of Crescent and Lockhart, and we've lived there for about 38 years now. We've seen a lot of changes. A lot of homes have been built. When we first moved there was no streetlights. There was just a very small number of neighbors in the area. Talking about the golf course, I've not seen it on any of the maps or any of the information I've looked at. There is a very small pond in the middle of that golf course. It's a spring-fed pond, and it has been there for 40 years or longer. There are so many animals, wildlife, reptiles, amphibians, the tree peepers, you can hear them in the spring, and our very beloved snapping turtles that live there throughout the summer, and they are a species at risk. This pond is now going to be covered over with these townhouses. So where is this snapping turtle going to live for the rest of its life if this pond is covered? And why is this pond not even on any of these information? It's pretty blatant where it is. So that's my big concern is with the wildlife, coyotes, turkeys, even down to the fireflies. You go by there in June, and the fields of all those long grasses, there's millions of fireflies out there. All these grasses will be cut down for homes. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dewar. I'm sure the pond issue will be addressed in the staff report when it comes forward. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Chris Maziolik, I'll wait her to spell that. A couple of concerns that I have. I've been, I lived in Innisfil since '86. It's lived in Lockhart since 2005. I don't know if these people actually ever walk back there. It's something amazing back there. It's the creek, the minnows have been mentioned, the coyote. I have recordings of coyotes. You can, since Lake Haven first started on the south side there, they just clear cut everything. Like they don't care what's there. So this place has a lot of animals. The coyotes are now moved to where they want to go now. So there's a lot of issues that they have to take into consideration. I realize it boils down to the almighty dollar. I understand that ultimately. I hope that the town council has more commitment to its residents and what's important to our long-lasting people that have been here. Traffic on Lockhart is going to be an issue. The other issue that I have, I'm going to make it really quick because I don't want to use it more than my 5 minutes. They also say narrowing the roads by 1.5 feet. To them, it's nothing. To us, just in the springtime, unfortunately, our neighbors behind us, their house caught fire. The Innisfil responded, but there's no hydrants in that area. They had to go down to the water, the lake edge, to pump the water, bring it back. The trucks are passing each other, and there's barely enough room for these two to get down, and now they want to narrow the road down another 1.5 feet. When the conditions are perfect, the ice fishing people come out, and they will park all the way down there. They've moved the no parking signs, and they abide by that. But they park all the way down, and of course, once that happens, then the roads get pretty narrow. It's small details like that that have to be changed in order to commit. I always to commit to the residents and to draw the line somewhere. I always say, I've told my family forever, like Innisfil to me has always been the best kept secret. Seriously. I mean, it has incredible entities. It has incredible potential. It's very, very proud people. And I think you can't lose focus of that. We have to stay within, we can't let the almighty dollar convert us to just a bunch of mumblies who don't give a crap about our residents anymore and what the standard of living that we want. There's still going to be Lake Haven West, Lake Haven South. Why don't they leave this? Why this area is a huge controversial area? They've already have the Joel Johnson farm, the new subdivisions going in there. It's all cleared. Why don't they move on to there? Why are they focusing on this? What is so important about this parcel of wetland that with the creek and everything else and the wildlife that's in there, that this has to be their priority? I just don't get it. But anyway, like I said, Innisfil has always been the best kept secret. Don't sell the farm. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Chris, can you just spell your last name for us, please?
M-I-Z-I-O-L-E-K. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who'd like to say a few words? Last chance, going once, going twice. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Ron Dewar, members of the council, members of the jury. Yeah, the old golf course, we call it, because that's what it was in the 50s. I think it was shut down in the 70s, so it was developed in the 50s or 40s as well. So there are some rock walls and some retaining features in there. The pond we discussed is in the southeast corner of the development. We're pretty certain it's a spring-fed pond, so you may want to look at that. And there are snapping turtles in there. We've rescued a couple. And I'd like to thank the other people that spoke about the wildlife in the areas. And it's been a pretty nice spot. We've lived there 40 years. It's been crazy busy lately with the traffic, with the construction. I'll say the 7 o'clock and the Saturday morning noise that happens at the development that's happening now isn't always nice. So that's something to possibly consider in this new development. There's going to be a lot of houses bordering that development that are a lot closer. So that noise might have to be something to be contended with as well. And let's hope we make some right decisions for now and for the future. Like one lady mentioned, the future of our children and how much bush we'll be taking down. I don't know why we have to take the bush down. The first thing they do is clear cut about 150 acres in their first development. That was quite the sound. They cut the trees down, put them in giant mulching machines, leave the mulch in the field. You talked about fill in the area of the new development. There's been fill going in there for years, just so you know. So I'm not sure how stable the soil is. And the creek, yeah, the fish in the creek. There used to be deer in the area. We used to look out in the yard and see them eating the acorns off the oak trees, the apple trees. They used to eat there. We haven't seen deer in the area in a couple of years now. That was always nice to see. We did see a fawn a couple of years ago, so that was nice. Haven't seen a deer in years. I'm sure people in the area will attest to that. Coyotes are trying to make way. They lost 150 acres of bush a couple of years ago when they started that development, so there's been lots of wildlife dispersed into different areas. Some are gone for good, gone forever. So let's hope we make some right decisions. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dewar. Anyone else have anything that they would like to say? Anything new information that wasn't brought up that people would like to bring forward now? Please, yes. Yes, Mr. Nick. Mr. Robbins.
Mr. Nick works. I did have a question about, you talked about the buffer zone along Lockhart, the 10-meter buffer zone, and talked about maybe being naturalized or something like that. To me, it seems like it would be a missed opportunity to not have sidewalk along there. People have talked about, and I've experienced it myself, trying to walk down Lockhart, that section used to be like the rest of the neighborhood where you can walk down the roads on the shoulder, it's not a big deal. These days, it's pretty scary to try and walk along that section. So it would make sense then to me, absolutely, to have a sidewalk there, but by the time you then have that sidewalk, where is the buffer zone, right? You've got 2 meters of sidewalk, 2 meters on each side, cleared. That's, you're up to the 6 meters into the buffer zone at that point as well. So that's something that I would love to see considered at the very least. And the other thing, hearing other people talk today, it doesn't sound like anyone's completely opposed to seeing any kind of development in the area, but what we don't want to see is this fire sale clear cut of everything that's there. And I think that if we are going to go forward with anything back there, it sounds to me like we need more than just someone going back and taking a look at what the environment is. We need a long-term assessment. We need someone to look at what it's like at different points during the year, because it is a migratory bird route, right? We see all kinds of different owls. We see kingfishers. Very commonly, they spend a lot of time in there in the spring and fall. We see so many different animals that beyond just being there all the time, like the salamanders. There are endangered species of salamanders in that pond that they were talking about that is in the development area. There are species, several species of turtles, 3 different species of turtles that I've seen. There, all these different types of animals, and they're not always there because it's a migratory route. Talking about the deer, talking about, other animals that are migrating through here. So I think it is important, to push for an assessment that is more than walking through and saying, hey, this is what's here, because it's more than that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you can probably read some of the reports on the Get Involved Innisfil website, that they'll be there, and have a look at them and see if you think that they're thorough enough. Anyone else before we go? Thank you.
Hi, Ron Pettit again. I've read those reports. They are not thorough. There are things in those reports that say to paraphrase, this space isn't really that important because there are other spaces within 5 to 10 kilometers. But do any of those spaces have direct tributaries to Lake Simcoe? I don't think so. Look up and down the map. Look within 10 kilometers of there. Are there any other parcels of land that are undeveloped with a river or stream running through them? Do you guys offhand? Anybody? Yeah, I don't think so. So we're hell-bent on wrecking the one that we have, it seems. That environmental assessment says that red-headed woodpeckers are very unlikely to live there. You know what you see when you walk back there? Red-headed woodpeckers. There is no mention of minnows of any sort in those hydrological or environmental assessments. But you know what those rivers are full of from the top to the bottom? Minnows, and I'm talking like hundreds of thousands of minnows, but it's not even in the report. I took the time to read the reports. I read that report. I read the hydrological report. And to me, it read like they were written by somebody who really would like to have this development complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. So last call for comments, keeping in mind that if you think of something when you go home tonight, you've got an opportunity. You can send your comments in writing to the clerk's office, and they will be considered. And that's, do we have any idea, Ms. Lee, when this might come back to council and how long people would have to submit extra comments?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Staff obviously have to go back and evaluate all the comments that have come in. We will need to advise the applicant. There may be changes to their studies or drawings that'll be required before it comes back to council, but we do need to be mindful there are timelines under the Planning Act from when the application is submitted in terms of that 180-day requirement from when the application is first submitted. So we're trying to balance those two things. So I'm not sure we can give an exact date at this point, just given all of the comments that have come in tonight.
Thank you, but you have a couple of weeks to formulate anything further that you'd like to say and submit it. Is that fair?
That would be fair, Mayor Dolan.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Resnick, you get the last word.
It's going to be short, too. I would just like to ask council if they would consider directing staff to call a meeting between in-services, the town planners, and any residents that wish to attend, and the developer, in a different setting, that we could discuss some things maybe openly. I just request it if you can consider that. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. Madam Clerk, has there been any emails come in from those watching online this evening?
Thank you, Worship. No, the clerk's office has not received any emails or correspondence this evening.
Thank you. So I want to thank everybody for your comments tonight. I know that they've all been written down and they will all be responded to and considered during this process. I also want to thank you all for being very considerate with your time and being succinct with your comments and questions. So thank you for that. We'll now go to the recommendation to receive the comments provided this evening. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Drudge, seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? That is carried. So anyone who wishes to provide comment may still do so and may also register as an interested party to be contacted before this item is considered by council. And please contact the clerk's office at innisfil.ca. Council thanks everyone for their participation with this public planning item, and we'll now go on to the second item of tonight's agenda regarding the shareholder review of the Town of Innisfil's wholly owned utilities companies. I'm going to ask council, do they need a 5-minute recess before we get going? Okay, mover and a seconder to have a 5-minute recess. Deputy Mayor Fowler, Councillor Waters, all those in favor? That's carried. Well, please be back here at 8:40 p.m. I want to thank everybody for their patience, and we'll get going in about 30 seconds. We'll now start with our scheduled delegations from the President and CEO of InPower, InServices, and Enterprises, and then members of the Board of Directors of those companies. Following delegations, members of the public will have an opportunity to bring forward questions and comments. So without further ado, we welcome Danny Prasad, the President and CEO.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, staff, members of the public, and esteemed guests. Thank you for having me tonight. With me, I have our chairs, Mr. Robert Lake, Mr. Oliver Gershow, and Director Donna Orsatti on the Enterprises side. And I've got members of my executive team as well that are here, that are able to join us tonight. First and foremost, I want to thank Council and staff for inviting me tonight to share management's feedback on the utility review undertaken by our shareholder. Overall, I believe there is value in undertaking this review, and it is important to reflect on the practices for the shareholder to set clear expectations and objectives for the utility companies. I want to also thank EY for their comprehensive report. While I'm not here to rehash it, I have some very important objectives in mind, 3 very important objectives, in order for you to make an informed decision on what you see tonight. First is the story, the context. One of the things that I didn't see in the EY report is the why. Why are some of these things happening? The numbers that are presented without context, I find, is half the story. So I'm here to give you the other half of the story tonight. The second objective tonight from telling the story is to let you know that since the report was based on 2022 information, there's been many recommendations that have already been addressed or already in progress. And I wish to share with you what we've done so far on those initiatives. My third objective tonight is to remind Council and our communities that these organizations are solely here for the benefit of our residents. These are your utilities and your services, and you have a say. So without further ado, I will start. Not sure this works. Right, so I wanted to start with a brief reminder of the opportunity categories in the EY report. There are 3 major opportunity categories, as you may recall. There are the efficiency and enhancement in the purple, there's the strategic growth opportunities, and there's the transformative and restructuring opportunities. And there are a series of items in each category. I intend to briefly go through each item and present management's opinion on each item, and explanations behind the reasoning of management's views on each item. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'll start with is the enhancement and the efficiency and enhancement opportunities. So items 1.1 to 1.3. As you'll see from item 1.1, updating the shareholder direction, management agrees with this item, as the current document is outdated and does require clarity on a few items. As mentioned by EY, it is also good governance hygiene for us to revisit this document to get a clear understanding of Council's objectives. For item 2, again, for the purposes of good governance, not only does management recommend this item, but there's already work in progress on it. Staff are undertaking a review of our board skills by undertaking a skills matrix and looking at the various items that EY has presented in their report. Some of these elements may require shareholder review and approval through the bylaws, and that is something that we hope to bring to Council to the AGM in June. With respect to item 1.3, we again recommend looking at onboarding and orientation from a governance perspective. EY has presented some really good ideas on improvements on this area, and that's something that we would like to proceed with. Okay, Next slide, please. With respect to item 1.4, management is recommending to renegotiate the MOU with the town of Innisfil for shared services. There are some areas in the organization that would or could benefit from shared services, and we think it's important that we take a look at the MOU and make any changes that are required. With respect to 1.5 and 1.6, you'll see that our position is that they are in progress. So not only, again, do we recommend them, but they are in progress. The two main things I want to mention on item 1.5 in particular is not only are they underway, but to provide you with the story and context on some of the items that are within this particular item. So with respect to enhancing efficiency opportunities for cost sharing, I want to stress that Empower has always strived to do more with less. We're a small utility that's growing quite exponentially, as you'll about to see, and we have a limited amount of staff that are able to execute on this work. With the amount of growth that the utility is facing, but more importantly, the pace of that growth, and legislation that we've seen around disconnecting from work and mental health and burnout risks, we have increased the headcount slightly on the Empower side. But that being said, we continue to explore opportunities for efficiencies in all facets of the organization. One initiative that we've done is looking at our leadership team and sharing much of the leadership team across the three utilities, and in fact, sharing a lot of the management team as well. The goal here is to use the money to invest in our front lines. There have been numerous other initiatives that have been done by Empower that we don't necessarily communicate or broadcast, and I think we do need to do a better job of that. Some of those lie in investments in paperless and sustainable systems to reduce time and waste. With respect to financial monitoring, management conducts periodic reviews and performance with staff. We operate within the Ontario Energy Board's approved revenue envelope and our Board of Directors' approved budget. Quarterly and year-end financial statements are delivered and reviewed with senior management and our boards and with council at our AGM. With respect to leveraging debt capacity, this is sort of where the story really matters. It is recommended in the report that we start looking at leveraging the debt capacity in Empower. But what's missing is that management made a strategic decision to not use that leverage. In fact, we made a strategic decision to reduce the amount of debt that we had in the organization from 2017 onwards, because we knew that there will be major transmission investments required to facilitate growth in Innisfil and South Barrie. So in essence, what we've done is we've created borrowing room so that when the time comes to borrow that money to make transmission investments, we will have the borrowing room to do that. And the time has come. The growth is here. With respect to 1.6, similarly for enterprises, a lot of these efforts are underway. Opportunities to increase revenue in enterprises are actively being explored. Since the departure of the previous CEO in 2022, management has increased annual revenues to date by over $100,000 and 2023 profits by over $171,000. This is important to mention because, as I mentioned before, the EY report stops its analysis at 2022. We do recommend and would like Council's direction into entering additional business lines and making potential new investments. I think that's an important consideration and a question that we would have. With respect to cost reduction, this has been achieved with the departure of the prior CEO and the sharing of a CEO and CFO for the organization, as well as some minor restructuring and division of labor within the organization. Similar to Empower, with respect to financial monitoring, we undertake the same review across all three utilities. We have quarterly and year-end statements delivered to the board, and we have ongoing performance reviews with our staff and management teams. So these are all in progress. Next slide, please. So with respect to the strategic growth opportunities, 2.1 to 2.3, we'll start with the first one. dissolving the shared services construct with the town, management does not recommend doing this. While there are elements of the MOU that need work, and In-Services is looking to establish its own identity as a utility in Ontario, we believe that a complete dissolution of shared services is not the best course of action. More information will be provided on the next slide. For 2.2, In-Services is only able to increase revenues by increasing water and wastewater rates. All rate increase recommendations are always balanced with customer affordability. This is thoroughly reviewed and discussed with our management and our board of directors before making a recommendation to council to change rates. While In-Services has not yet taken on debt to facilitate growth, there really has not been a need to do so at this point. In-Services management has always been fiscally responsible to its customers and had made the strategic choice to not take on debt if there wasn't a need to do so at this time. With the pace of growth that is being experienced and the major investments that are required throughout the town, such as the wastewater treatment plant expansion, we expect that we will have to explore debt financing over the next year. So the time has come again for us to revisit our financial position and look at taking on debt. Again, I won't rehash the recommendation around financial monitoring, but we are undertaking a comprehensive financial review of the utility periodically on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. With respect to 2.3, management does recommend expanding business lines through enterprises. That's something we would like council's input on, and would seek direction from council on the types of businesses that we would be looking into. That being said, the organization has taken initiatives to expand on its own. We've since added 22 electric vehicle chargers throughout Innisfil, on top of the additional 2 cell towers, communication towers that we've put in. Staff has also made efforts to expand its communication tower business line across multiple municipalities and LDCs, and are currently working with Rogers Telecommunications and Bell to look at if there is an opportunity in those areas that we've looked at. Next slide, please. So for the item that we did not recommend in section 2, the dissolving of the shared services construct, I wanted to highlight the risk of why we would not do that. So as I mentioned, while there are elements of the MOU that need work, we believe that dissolving the shared services construct entirely could reduce opportunities to collaborate. We believe that if service taking is made to be optional, service level agreements are created and adhered to with an escalation and dispute process and updated clauses, we could create a construct that is win-win for both parties and not dissolve something that has worked in the past. Next slide, please. With respect to transformative and restructuring opportunities, management is supportive of item 3.1, which is the exploration of the multi-utility models. There are several advantages to exploring this model that EY has alluded to in their report, including but not limited to a potential increase in debt capacity by borrowing against all subsidiaries, as well as an opportunity to use future growth in the auxiliary businesses to keep rates down. That would be cross-subsidizing rates. This could serve Innisfil well for future opportunities as they emerge and we're able to spin off additional corporations underneath a common holding company. A preliminary exploration of this was completed by staff on this item back in 2021. With respect to item 3.2, the sale of InPower, management does not recommend proceeding with this for several reasons, mostly centered around InPower's rapid growth and our communities being our #1 priority. We believe that there will be a loss of community value and community benefit. I will speak to this in the next 2 slides. With respect to item 3.3, dissolving in-services back into the town, as you see, management does not agree with this item for several reasons, again, centered around in-services debt capacity, again, due to its rapid growth of the organization, and provincial alignment. Again, I will speak to this in more detail in an upcoming slide. With respect to item 3.4, the exploration of a regional utility model, management does recommend exploring this. In-Services is established as a municipal services corporation. It has a separate board of directors, and it already undertakes cross-border servicing to Bradford. In-Services is well positioned to lead the charge here. In-Services is here to support the province, Innisfil, and all participating municipalities to reach its growth goals. A large utility will allow for investments into leading technology and asset management. It is an opportunity for Innisfil to be masters of our own destiny, and it should be explored further, especially in light of the growth targets that the province is putting forth and that our municipality and our neighboring municipalities are looking at as well. With respect to item 3.5, dissolution or sale of enterprises, management does not recommend this option for several reasons centered around the intrinsic value that enterprises is here for community benefit first before profits. That has always been the mantra of enterprises. Again, I will speak to this in an upcoming slide. Next slide, please. I'll start with the sale of InPower. I've highlighted on the slide some risks of that potential sale. First and foremost, InPower is facing rapid growth. Selling now may have premature returns for the town rather than selling later, especially if the cash is not needed now. Over the past 5 years alone, the average annual growth in retained earnings for InPower has been $2.6 million per year. The forecast estimated growth for InPower over the next 5 years is about $3.1 million per year. My next slide will speak more on the growth in value. The second biggest risk, in my opinion, is a loss of community value. Since 2021, InPower has resumed payment of a dividend to the town while it continues to reinvest in the utility to meet the growth needs and grow the shareholders' equity. An outright sale of the utility will no longer produce a dividend or growth in equity for the town. Also, most importantly, when Barrie annexed the town's lands in 2009, my understanding is that the town did not receive remuneration for this. In exchange, the ability for the town's electric utility to service these lands was a strong benefit for the town at that time, and I believe should continue to be an important value of driver with the degree of growth that is facing South Barrie now, that Innisfil will benefit from. With respect to community benefit, Innisfil and South Barrie residents are our first and only priority. In a storm, we are dispatching out to Innisfil and South Barrie, not to other areas of the province. Further, we have developed deep-rooted relationships with many of our customers. As InPower is a locally owned utility, its customers are able to influence the decision of the organization because we have less red tape. My office is always open. Finally, a sale could also result in a loss of local control for council. A local office and local presence may no longer be available. We are in control of our own destiny, not with a third-party utility. Next slide, please. So this is the slide I was speaking to and describing the exponential growth that InPower is seeing. I apologize that it's a little small to see, but I'll try my best to explain the slide. So the horizontal axis on the bottom is the years from the year 2000 on to year 2027. The vertical axis is the dollar value in retained earnings for the corporation. The color blue is all of the historical and current year, and the color green is all of the future years. There are two trend lines on this graph. There's one trend line that runs from the year 2000 all the way out to 2027. This is the trend line of growth across the last 23 years. The second trend line is slightly smaller. It starts on year 2017 and runs till 2023. That's the growth in the last 5 years alone. The data shows that the average growth in retained earnings over the past 22 years has been about $1.5 million per year. This is likely more than the town would have seen in an annual dividend. Over the past 5 years alone, the average growth has been about $2.6 million a year. The forecast 5-year estimated annual growth is, as I mentioned before, $3.1 million per year. We expect that the number of customers for InPower will double within the next 10 to 15 years. This will lead to improved value for the utility. If you couple this with the potential loss of community benefits previously discussed, the case to sell at this time is not strong. The bottom line here is that we are not biased. Our fiduciary duty is to the corporation, and all decisions we make or recommend are in the best interest of the corporation and all of its stakeholders, I should add, including the town of Innisfil. And it is in management's opinion that the sale of the utility at this time is not in the best interest of the corporation. Next slide, please. Switching gears to dissolving in-services back into the town. Management is not in favor of this option as well. First, we see a risk to the impact of debt financing. In-services was developed as a separate utility to take on debt. While it hasn't to this point, it will need to in order to face the growth challenges as previously discussed. Dissolving it back into the town will put pressure on town finances to meet the growth needs that in-services is experiencing right now. While the town is limited on its use of debt financing, in-services is not. With respect to government alignment, the push for Municipal Services Corporation right now in the province, and with several municipalities, is the highest it's ever been. This is primarily as a result of the growth targets that municipalities are facing and a quest to mirror the utility rate-making philosophies seen on the electricity side. A move to bring the utility back into the town may be misaligned with the direction that the province and other municipalities are heading in. Finally, with respect to regional models, if the town chooses to roll in services back into the town, it may miss out on an opportunity to explore regional servicing. Again, this is something that the province is very interested in order to meet its growth targets. Back in 2015, Innisfil had an innovative and groundbreaking idea to spin off a water-wastewater utility to accomplish its growth goals. This utility is well positioned to explore these regionalized services, as I mentioned before, because it has a separate board of directors and provides cross-border services to a neighboring municipality. Again, this is an opportunity to be masters of our own destiny. A move to dissolve in services would not permit this. Next slide, please. So finally, we have the dissolution or sale of enterprises. Similar to a sale of InPower, a sale of dissolution of enterprises is not being recommended by management. Enterprises has always operated with the goal of community first, profit second. The organization has a rich history of bringing services such as cellular and mobile internet to Innisfil when mobile carriers refused because it strictly did not make a business case. The organization has since expanded its business lines and ventured further into electric vehicle chargers, as I mentioned. A low-profit business today, but it will create a forward-thinking Innisfil for tomorrow. A move to dissolve or sell enterprises may lead to a loss of value-added services to residents. An example I wanted to share with you publicly is the EV chargers that we've put in Innisfil today generate about $6,000 a year. That's what I mean by low profit margin. For a typical business case, this is a rounding error, down to zero. but it's something that we believe is important to build a connected community. And it's something that a company like Enterprises would value, putting community benefit over profits. Finally, on this point, I want to talk about risk of loss of local control, local office, and local presence. Again, as mentioned before, due to its low profit margins, Enterprises does not pay a dividend to the town, but it reinvests its profits into the business, which, as a reminder for council, that's what grows the equity for the shareholder over time. If the town chooses to expand this organization, which is what's recommended, there is a possibility of a dividend declaration in the future. That will be gone if the organization is dissolved or sold. Further, since the organization is town-owned, there is meaningful consultation and less red tape, similar to the other town utilities. Enterprises has a lot of potential. This organization can be used for a variety of ventures as a special purpose entity. There are many strategic and perhaps sustainable energy portfolio companies that we could look at, or opportunities rather, that we could look at. I've placed some examples of projects here that could be explored through this organization. If the organization is dissolved or sold, another organization would have to be started to look at these projects for the town, or the town may look at it itself. But again, there will be financial implications to the town. One thing to note is that if this organization is dissolved, InPower cannot generally seek out such revenue opportunities that are available to Enterprises. There is a restriction in the Ontario Energy Board Act that does not permit anything but operating a distribution organization. Next slide, please. Again, speaking to the EY report, having data up until 2022, we wanted to highlight again that 2023 revenues have increased by over $100,000. We've renegotiated several communication tower contracts. We've got the EV chargers, and we've undertaken a series of inspections on communication towers and looking at making repairs. The 2023 net income rose by over $170,000, and the organization is again profitable. Okay, next slide, please. So one option for council to consider in the examination of all the options we've considered so far is for it to revise its shareholder direction, which is what's recommended, potentially establish a dividend target that allows the utility to grow, establish a shareholder equity, so continue to build the value in the company, but leave enough also for our community needs to be met. In tandem, it would work to permit utilities to work together in a multi-utility fashion to generate the maximum dividend that it can for the town. We would take that dividend and invest it into a special investment reserve fund to pay for large community projects. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I'll go through some of the summary slides here just to wrap up. You'll see these are items that management are not recommending pursuing at this time. Next slide, please. This is a list of items that management is recommending that we pursue. Next slide, please. And finally, these are items that not only do we recommend, but they are already underway. Okay, next slide, please. And that is it. So again, I want to thank council and staff for giving me the opportunity to present tonight, and I hope that this presentation has been valuable for you.
Thank you very much, Danny, for that thoughtful presentation and for waiting so long to deliver it to us. Questions from members of council? Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Worship. I have a number of them, so I'm going to beg your indulgence on this one. You mentioned early in the presentation about sharing team leaders across platforms. Will this allow greater communication between the teams to establish a more productive synergy when projects emerge, like how one can piggyback off another sort of scenario?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. That is exactly why we've chosen to look at this option. The leadership team at the top, having them cross between the three organizations, they're able to examine the various synergies that each organization has and able to direct their teams under them appropriately so that we are having the maximum community benefit and alignment as possible.
Thank you. I had a conversation with Mrs. Rosati on Monday regarding this whole scenario. One of the ideas she presented was the idea of breaking into the household itself. For example, chargers in people's garages that Enterprise could install, and then from there, in-services could piggyback off of. Speaking of InPower, you mentioned the projected timeline to be income positive from serving annexed lands. Are we looking at a 4 to 5 year plan before this becomes, as it grows? Because you mentioned 3.1 million per year. Are we talking 3.1 million in the first year, 6.2 the second year? Is it compounded, or is it a steady 3.1 over the next 5 years?
So through you, Your Worship, that is the average annual increase that we're seeing across the 5 years after we look at projections in retained earnings.
Thank you. A regional utility model. Are we talking just InPower, or are we talking in services? Because I know, for example, New Tech has a situation that they need water servicing. Would we be able to use in-service to supply them, even though it potentially crosses boundaries and watersheds? Is that something you'd be investigating in a regional utility model, or would it just be simply just the electrical grid?
Through Your Worship, so that project is specifically only for the water wastewater side. It's not for looking at the power side. So the regional utility would likely go across borders into Bradford and into New Tech and perhaps even into Barrie. And we would look at sharing lake-based water as well as perhaps treated sewage and effluent.
And lastly, selling InPower, we wouldn't get that much for it. I believe it'd be under $30 million, if I understand correctly. I can see why you wouldn't want it, because that would be eaten up in the first budget cycle, just be gone, right? So I agree with not selling it at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Danny, for that good presentation. I think you answered a lot of good questions. Can you give me an idea, what do you see the benefits between the way you operate now, because you're the CEO of 3 utilities, and a PUC? So in terms of the opportunities that are available under a PUC as opposed to the way you operate now, what differences do you see? Because you're the CEO of all 3 of them. So what would the PUC offer us in terms of that model?
Through you, Your Worship. So the multi-utility model, I believe, can offer a variety of benefits, including what I mentioned, the potential for us to borrow against all of our subsidiaries into our holding company, and then the holding company would choose how to divest those funds into either of the utilities that need them. So for example, if our objective was to lower utility rates, then we would try to generate as much revenue in, for example, Enterprises or some other organization, and roll that dividend up to the holding company and have that reinvested as a revenue offset into one of the utilities, and that would help with rates. So it allows us to cross-subsidize, it allows us to borrow against the assets on either organization, and it also will allow us to, more of a softer skill, but harmonize our culture. So across from having 2 separate cultures, 2 separate management teams, having a common utility model is going to help with normalizing the culture.
Okay, thank you. One other question. Something we learned tonight, and I did have a conversation with our CEO during our break, is that we were talking about a regional model to help grow the organization. But I think what we have in Innisfil is huge gaps in terms of parts of Innisfil which don't get serviced. And I think we just learned today that there's lots of these little gaps which don't have wastewater and water. So my question is there any opportunity to, between when these planning applications coming through and working with the developers, is to start bringing those services which we offer in terms of water and wastewater to Innisfil residents who already live here and have been living here for years?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. That is something that we constantly look at through development applications. Unfortunately, those infills are something of the past and are something that we will look forward to in the future on filling those gaps.
Yeah, because I think like we just saw that Lake Haven there's 4 components to it, and that, you know, I think if this was brought together to us as an integrated plan overall, we would have seen the huge potential. But since we're dealing with it one at a time, we're not looking at it as an opportunity to help other residents in the neighborhood. And I think that we heard that loud and clear tonight. So it would be nice to see not only us looking at a regional model expanding outwards, but also to look inwards and also to work more closely with the planning department to get those services to existing residents. Even though there might be a few who don't want it, I think a majority would rather have water and wastewater in their communities because they've been here for 30 years and still don't have it. So just a point. Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Persaud? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you, Danny, for the presentation. This is a really good opportunity for us to discuss these issues. The one thing that gets me a little bit, and maybe I don't understand as clearly because of me not maybe paying as much attention. As a shareholder, as we get your annual meeting reports and whatnot, and we always talk about we like to have these utilities because they provide a community benefit versus making as much money as we can. Not to sound too extreme, but it's easy to see when we make lots of money because there's a big number there, and we get to use it for whatever we want. Can you explain maybe the community benefits to our residents? Because they're harder sometimes to get your head around. As a resident, a community benefit to me would be, well, I want the cheapest price, and maybe that is a good enough benefit for me, but that doesn't cover everybody equally because people are all different. Maybe I'm wondering if you can comment maybe on those community benefits.
Sure. Through Your Worship, there's a lot to unpack there. I think the rates are an important consideration. And just to speak a little bit to the rates, we did go in for a cost of service, and on our distribution rate, it did go down. It likely had not gone down on people's bills because we are under the distribution rate protection, which is a protection that is an Ontario regulation for rural municipalities in Ontario. But the distribution rate did go down. It will go down or at least stabilize as we see more and more growth happen because we have more customers to divide our costs across. So that's one thing to be said. I think to answer your question holistically, every dollar that residents pay into their distribution portion of their bill that goes to InPower is invested in our communities. So that means all of the infrastructure that we're putting in benefits them. All of the storm response or any sort of outage response goes strictly towards our customers. I think the important thing to note is if the utility were to be sold to any other any other LDC, it really wouldn't mitigate any storm response. It wouldn't mitigate any outage responses. The reality is a lot of the communities across Innisfil are still rural, We still have a lot of trees and a lot of animal contact, and these things just will not go away with a new utility. So I think these are all community benefits that we put directly back into this community. We don't take the rates and invest them into anywhere outside of Innisfil and Southbury.
So maybe to expand on that, how would the utilities run differently if we said we want maximum dividends as a town, and we're going to take those dividends and we're going to put them back into the town in a different way?
Okay, through you, Your Worship. So everything should come with balance, but in the extreme scenario that you've mentioned, it would reflect in a less of an ability to grow and less of an ability to proactively maintain our distribution system. It may mean less tree trimming that we have to do. It may mean more outages. It may mean less staff. It will reflect in the operating costs for us to create a dividend. That's the short answer for it. Or we'd have to go out and borrow that money and bake that into rates to make our dividend.
Yeah, so I do appreciate that answer, but part of me wonders, if I'm an Ontario Hydro customer, is my service going to be that much less? How do you measure that? And, if we are going to compare how much Ontario Hydro makes off their customers or Electra or whatever group we're talking about, do we know what that difference is? And can we justify, or can we explain that, well, that's just the cost of us trimming trees more and doing things better for our residents? Do we have that as proof of what you're saying, I guess is what I'm asking.
So through Your Worship, it's a little bit of a difficult answer to provide, but the Ontario Energy Board is doing activity cost benchmarking for different utilities. So they look at what it costs for each utility to service each area. And while there are comparators being developed, Innisfil is quite a unique place, having a little bit of urban, a little bit of rural, and kilometers upon kilometers of line. And so it's very difficult to find a direct comparator for the costs that you're mentioning. But I think the value of service that our communities are seeing right now from a utility that cares 100% for Innisfil and Southbury is going to feel a lot different than it would be for a utility that services other municipalities as well.
So maybe I'm talking a little bit in the extremes. Is there a case the council could make where we could get more of a dividend, but still keep those services up at a level where we can say to our residents, yes, Innisfil is unique. We are getting good value for owning these utilities, but as shareholders, we can realize more dividends into the future.
Yeah, through Your Worship, that's exactly what we're proposing on the table, is for us to look at that and have those conversations. I think there is a middle ground where we can absolutely do that. But it will come with compromises if we do it in today's framework, or perhaps we look at the multi-utility framework where council charts all the utilities to work together to create a maximum dividend that goes to the town and utilizes services across the three organizations. To me, there's ways to do that. And if we, not only enterprises, but if we spin off new special purpose entities that are able to make us more money, potentially through public-private partnerships, we could generate revenue offsets, as I mentioned before. And those revenue offsets would get invested into the companies that pay, that have ratepayers, which are in power and in services, which would reduce rates.
Thank you for that. I do look forward to seeing what that middle ground looks like.
Thank you. On that note, I just want to make one comment. So many municipalities around us that are like us, like Bradford, West Gwillimbury, New Tecumseh, the densely populated, profitable part of the municipality is Electra. So Bradford itself is Electra, Alliston is Electra, but the rural part of Tecumseh, the rural part of West Gwillimbury is Hydro One. So it's almost like they cherry pick the parts that are going to make them the most money, and then Hydro One is, again, a utility protected, I believe. Their rates are protected because they're rural. They look after the areas that nobody else wants because they're not going to make the profit that the more densely populated, urbanized, no trees, no squirrels areas do. So one of the things I've always appreciated about Empower is the fact that every Innisfil resident is serviced by Empower, and the utility looks after everybody, not where, depending on where you are in the municipality, you don't know who to call this company or call that company. I just want to make that point. Anyone else, questions or comments for Danny on his presentation? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. I'm much appreciated, and I have a recommendation that the delegation from the President and CEO of Empower in Services and Enterprises be received as information. Moved by Councillor Constantine, seconded by Councillor Eisses. All those in favor? That is carried. Now, we've also had some very patient members of our Board of Directors here with us tonight, so I would ask if there's delegation by members of Board of Directors. I have first Mr. Bob Lake, the Chair of the Empower Board. And you've got a long drive home, Mr. Lake, so thank you for your patience.
Well, I trust everyone has received this document, and I trust everyone, if you had questions, have prepared them. So why don't we go straight to questions? I'll accept flattery as well.
Anyone? Questions or comments for Mr. Lake?
I just want to reemphasize that my experience, I've been in the business since 1972. And by the way, I did live on what was called Fairway Drive. And the property across the road from where I lived was a golf course, and that's what you were looking at tonight. My experience is that sharing services amongst various utilities, water, wastewater, and electricity can be very beneficial. I'm going to give you some serious examples. In Peterborough, we had 2 storms within a few years. One was called a 100-year storm, and one was called a 200-year storm. And in the middle of that, we had a blackout in 2003, which affected northeastern of North America. And during those times, we found it very valuable to have folks that had backhoes and trucks to help the folks with electricity, you know, to do whatever they had to do, and likewise, vice versa. I'll give you an example. In January of 1994, we had some extreme weather, no snow cover, had all kinds of services freeze up. We even had water mains freeze that are 6 feet in the ground. And of course, our electric guys can drive trucks and big trucks and have trucks that can dig. They helped out in that service. And one other thing that they did, which is a little bit risky, I showed them how to take a welder, because we had all kinds of services froze up going into houses. They didn't have any water. I showed them how to get a welder and to connect it and to be careful and to be patient and to use measurements. and to let the electricity going through that service heat up the pipe so it melts the ice and they were back to in service, and then tell the customer to let it run like about the size of a pencil until this cold weather is gone. We couldn't do that if we had two different separate organizations operating as separate silos. So that's one practical example. We have one set of IT applications. We have one HR group. We have one accounting group. And on the system goes. And deregulation wrecked that for the 127 PUCs that existed. And they lost the benefit of shared services. And I would ask you to consider a regional model. So often when there's an annexation proposed, it's the urban municipality that wants to have land, and it's the rural municipality that needs water and wastewater, and they don't have it, and then there's a fight. And I think you went through that a few years back, and I think our mayor was the only one on council at the time. If you had a regional water, wastewater utility, that wouldn't happen. Their focus is on helping development. And like I say in my presentation, if there's a development for an organization, be it a factory or a casino or whatever, it's not just the people of that municipality that benefit, it's the whole area, because it brings in jobs to everybody, and those people with jobs create more economic activity. So that's something that you could seriously consider. It would not have to be entirely the county of Simcoe. It could be simply a few other partner municipalities that are on your borders. So thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Just for the record, council did receive a copy of your submission, but those watching, if they're on live stream, or those members of the public did not. But through the clerk, we could probably attach to the agenda so that they would be available to the public, if that's suitable for you. Thank you. Ms. Orsatti, Board Member for Enterprises.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening as a board member's perspective of Enterprises. Previous Council approved a staff report to support a subsidiary company, Enterprises, with a small approved seed investment to pursue revenue opportunities in Innisfil, with the understanding of entrepreneur risk and reward opportunities. Recently, the change in CEO and board resulted in restructuring Enterprises with Danny Persaud and Glenn McAllister stepping in to oversee our daily administrative operations and budgets. In the past year that I have been on the board, staff have completed, reviewed, and closed open EV charger contracts with Friday Harbor and closed open non-applicable grant applications while managing with the remaining limited budget. Our focus continued reviewing contracts, maintenance schedules, and repairs for all cellular towers in Innisfil were completed as required. Enterprises reviewed the need for community-enhanced service with the addition of a new council-approved cell tower in Stroud to provide improved cellular service to our residents and businesses in dead or weak signal zone areas, while bringing in improved services and revenue streams from mobile carriers and future opportunities for rental space on those towers. Enterprises is now ready to explore other opportunities for revenue streams and community service to implement with council approval. Challenges for municipalities in this economic climate is to think outside the box and look at how can we do things differently that enhance the service in our community and economic opportunities. Council has the opportunity to decide if they wish to continue to have a subsidiary company to look at revenue stream opportunities in Innisfil by supporting enterprises, the money, the time to investigate these, while we, as a board, understand the need for regular updates to Council and business cases on potential projects for Council approval before moving forward on any project. As a board member, I believe that there are many revenue opportunities to explore that are not available to InPower before any termination of enterprises, and with regular reporting, an understanding of Council's clear expectations, and a discussion on timeframe opportunities to measure our progress effectively, we can succeed. As a final note, as a board member, I wanted to thank our CAO, Oliver Chershaw, for pursuing the need to hire an external consulting firm of Ernst & Young to review how our utilities fit with Council's current strategic plan. I believe the consultant report should be seen as a report card on recommendations for improvement, on opportunities for growth, or changes needed after careful consideration with public input before Council's final decision later in the year. I want to thank you, and with Council approval, as a resident of Innisfil, I understand that I may now use a few minutes of your time to give input on InPower to allow more uninterrupted time for our other residents waiting in open forum. Switching to a private resident hat, thank you. As a resident of Innisfil for 33 years, I would like to comment on the InPower portion of the report and the option for sale. As a former councillor, we explored this option 9 years ago and determined it was not viable at that time, with many of the same concerns then as I have now, and I'd like to share some of these with you. If we sold InPower, who would be the buyer? Electra? Barrie is a shareholder with Electra. Barrie Hydro Holdings Inc., municipality subsidiary, and City of Barrie are unanimous shareholders. We question, and this still holds true, if we would be a small fish in a pond compared to the City of Barrie, who would be serviced first in major hydro outages, the largest shareholder of Barrie or the small rural community? Employment. Council has always said that we want to look for ways for attracting businesses to provide local employment opportunities for our community. A sale would require the termination of employees, many who are Innisfil residents, and severance package buyouts. Sale of property. What happens to the InPower building? I do not foresee Electra being interested in our building after having their headquarters in Vaughan. The town would have to find businesses willing to rent office space, then go into the landlord business of finding tenants, administration of contracts, and tenant resolution, like the Rosardo Center. Service. InPower provides great customer service to small businesses and our residents, our customers. They respond quickly to concerns. They have the staff you can meet and talk to in person. Outages are responded to quickly, and residents are updated on their outage maps when service will resume. My husband, an electrician, can call InPower and book hydro shutdowns for residential work for our residents or short turnaround times versus trying to contact a real person at Electra. The 6 to 9 week turnaround for some permits in Barrie creates frustration and costly wait times for both his Barrie residents, his customers, and himself in response to complete this work. Value. I have always believed the belief that you do not sell investment stocks, your home or business, when something may be a little lower in value, when it has the opportunity to gain a higher value and profit in the future. I would want to see more information on how the money from the sale after paying debt, taxes, and Hydro One would be invested or spent. As a councillor, you know how quickly our budgets can eat up millions within 1 year or just one project. Once it's gone, and the revenue stream along with it. I remember our mayor referring to a quote in my time on council that I've thought of many times in making my decision process. I want to remind you, repeat that quote. It is like taking toothpaste out of a tube. Once it's out, you can't put it back. Well, if you sell InPower, there is no going back. Instead, look at opportunities in the future first. Just imagine the value of InPower after a few years of servicing all the new Southbury homes and the revenue streams and dividends to the town. When Barrie annexed Innisfil for the 4th time, we received no compensation from the city, only the opportunity to provide hydro to former Innisfil lands, now South Barrie. Only now, with the rapid growth in Barrie's South End and Innisfil, can we start to begin receiving revenue streams from the annexation, providing financial viability in the years to come, and see dividends to shareholders continue to grow. As a resident, I believe maintaining ownership is key to future growth, along with local, accessible customer support to our residents. I am not in favor or support of the sale of InPower. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Councillor Asadi. So a little bit of agenda gymnastics here. So we're going to pass a recommendation that delegations from members of Board of Directors for InPower, In-Services, and Enterprises be received as information. I guess that should just be InPower and Enterprises because nobody from In-Services made it. So just small change there. All in favor, or sorry, mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Zanella, Councillor Waters, all those in favor? That is carried. And next we'll hear from members of the public, and we'll pretend that former Councillor Asadi just said all of that about InPower in this session of the meeting. And next we'll go to former Councillor Rob Nicol.
Thank you, Your Worship. After listening to those 3 presentations, I feel much, much better. But since I took 5 minutes and got it down to 2, I'm going to say what I brought anyways. Good evening, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, Council, and staff. It is great to be back at the office and see that you guys are taking care of it while I'm off. Kidding somewhat, but seriously, that's why I'm here today, to talk about the direction of InPower, In-Services, and Enterprises. I think a shareholder alignment review is a good thing. And I watched the Ernst & Young presentation, but they stated numerous times it was a broad overview and much, much more information would be needed to make any substantial directive changes. I'm curious as to the urgency to get this public meeting out already, since I was just presented last week. I will share that past councils may have been led down some paths which could have resulted in detrimental consequences, including had we sold to EPCOR. I fought hard and rallied council not to sell for any short-term gain compared to the long-term benefits. I still have my notes here. Many, many, many notes. So I was a little concerned to hear that Ernst & Young are based out of that EPCOR building. I wondered if staff shared that with council, but obviously, Lynn, you mentioned that night you had no idea either and stepped right in that one. All entities have been identified to have boards with some limited diversities of skills and backgrounds, and none of them have fully implemented their direction or have reporting processes and compliance enforcements to the shareholder. So there is room for improvement. I know Lynn shared more than a few times the story of how Newtech sold their hydro company and built a hospital years ago, and they've regretted it ever since. That short-term influx of cash was not anywhere near the potential revenues that they would have really realized. We created the MSC years ago to unlock debt capacity to achieve the infrastructure required to service Innisfil Heights and provide electricity to developments in the South Barrie Annex lands. That investment will reap huge rewards for us in the years to come. It seems that town staff's new word is divesting, but in a growing community, you have to invest in our future. What I read was about opportunities, enhancements, along with the need for greater accountability and ultimately investment for growth and profitability in the future. I and others will be watching to see what path staff lead you down tonight and beyond, especially with the mention of the PIL tax issue. Could be, since it was like said that the direction will likely be coming within a month. I hope that I'm wrong, but my fear is that we've seen this type of pattern before, so please don't let yourselves go down this path. I fully support the recommendations provided in Danny, Bob, and Donna's presentations, and I really think that Enterprises needs to get back to what it was supposed to do in finding opportunities for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicol, for your comments. And next on the list is Marvin Geist. Mr. Geist.
Last but not the least. Maybe we're saving the best for the last. You know, it was interesting this morning when I was preparing for this brief at 9:30, my hydro went out for 45 minutes. It was difficult to include my presentation. So, I'm here this evening, one as a resident of the town for 77 years. I've also been the president of the largest ratepayers group in the town. I've been involved with town projects and administration and your official plan and your master plan and things that we did 20 and 30 years ago. I've been a developer here. I am one. I act for developers. But tonight, I'm talking about Marvin Geist, but I will call myself the Royal We. Okay. Currently, the provincial government is encouraging municipalities to become more efficient and innovative in delivery of their services. So we applaud the town of Innisfil for undertaking this review, and especially our CAO, Oliver Jeshaw, who, without him, this wouldn't have happened. And we really enjoy his involvement in anything that doesn't look right, because he wants to make it right. It's clear that your consultant has reflected upon the good, the bad, and the ugly reality of some of the challenges and opportunities that you were facing with your wholly owned utilities companies. That's InServices, InPower, and Enterprises. Thank you for sharing this report with us and inviting us to provide some comments as you grapple with the issues that are in that extensive report. It is our hope that through this process, some of our ideas and suggestions will provide you with the feedback to make the appropriate decisions. We note that there is an emerging theme that comes through the Ernst & Young report, which is a key for your consideration. Let's take you specifically to page 116 of the report and begin with an understanding of the core principles which underlie the concept of good corporate governance. Thank you. This is a term that gets tossed around a lot, but most likely few really consider what it really means. Well, let me say that good corporate governance has its underpinning in what I would refer to as the A list. Many governance experts, including your consultants, reference these principles as accountability, leadership, integrity, stewardship, and transparency. And it's all there on your list. Now let's take a second to consider what these mean in the context of the work of the board or boards. Accountability. That describes a process by which individuals within the organization take responsibility and are held accountable for their decisions and actions. Leadership is about setting the tone at the top of the organization and is critical to ensuring that the culture of the organization embraces good governance practices. Integrity is about acting in a way that is impartial, ethical, honest, and utilizes our resources in compliance with legislation, regulations, and policies while instilling a high level of professionalism in all our dealings and undertakings. And up there, again, it will say stewardship, which speaks to the acts of looking after the public resources and serving the best interests of the public in the execution of our decisions. And transparency. Transparency is the practice of providing full, accurate, and clear information respecting our decisions and actions, and ensuring that they are open and accessible to the public, stakeholders, and our employees. The board, in turn, should be seeking to align its governance approach through several important initiatives. Again, we acknowledge the work of your consultants who nailed the key components that the board should be directing in collaboration with the company's executive leadership. And if you look to slide 116, that's the good governance alignment approach. For the sake of brevity, we would simply jump to a recommendation under the Transformation Restructuring Opportunities section to address most of which I would like to emphasize, but it is critical that we speak specifically to these key governance alignment initiatives. The first piece that is critical is having a well-defined corporate purpose. As the shareholder, how well have you defined the purpose for these companies? And do the governing documents of these companies reflect the purposes in a clear fashion? Secondly, how does the business strategy approach those purposes? Let's play the role of devil's advocate here and challenge any of your current board members or any of your past members to articulate the business strategy for which each of the boards may serve upon. Do you think they could really do that? I suggest they can't. I have trouble with my own boards at the Conservation Authority. You have to know what the strategy is all about. Thirdly, if the strategy is to be effective, then you need to have a clear understanding of the current organizational capacity of each one of your companies. Your consultant has raised some significant questions and concerns and specifics to question, especially as it relates to the in-services company. If you want to set these companies up for success, then it is critical for you to address these problems. Fourth, does each of these companies have the right people with the right skills along with adequate resources to place today? Are the people who are leading these companies capable of achieving the vision set out for each company? And finally, are the management systems necessary to give the assurances to each of the boards in place to help drive the results and the performance for those organizations? These latter questions surfaces in parts of the report as real concerns, and they're right there in the slides. Let's be honest with each other. For the most part, you can replace the governance model and transition these entities back to the municipal administration structure, but it seems that you would then sacrifice the very benefits that were identified as the reasons for the creation of these companies in the first place. The reason that you are struggling today with deciding on the future of these companies is largely attributable to one specific issue. It's because we currently lack the skills and level of expertise at the board level. We have not, by all appearances, created a climate for the success of the board and ultimately the success of these companies. When we fail to make board member recruitment decisions based on the skills that those boards require, then we don't have much hope that we will get the outcome we desire. Let's keep in mind that the exercise of populating a corporate board is not the same as recruiting people to a volunteer citizen advisory committee. The stakes are very much higher, and we require far more diligence in our decisions and devoid of politics. Today, governance practices demand and require that we focus on recruiting people with the skills necessary to make the board successful. And it isn't about simply populating a board with accountants, lawyers, engineers, or industry experts. It's about understanding what the desired and required skills are and establishing a matrix to ensure that there are the requisite skills on that board for one to succeed. Establishing the skills matrix for each board is a critical step in the process. Now, it's up on the board, slide 7. This is Ernst & Young that I'm talking about in my deputation. Your consultants have clearly identified these weaknesses. And at slide 7, as it pertains to InPower, states, while board composition is in accordance with shareholder direction, it has limited diversity of skills and backgrounds. Additionally, it does not have a robust assessment and monitoring process for appointments and performance management of current members. That's what Ernst & Young says. Look to slide 8. Do we have it up there, sir? Kevin? Okay, slide 8. In dealing with in-services, we note concerns have been raised about the diversity of skills on the board, commensurate with the nature of the corporation, the independence of the board, and the term and reappointment limits. Then we go to number 9. Similar concerns are raised with enterprises. Similar challenges were cited regarding the board composition, specifically seeking a board member with an entrepreneurial background and term as the other entities. It is also important for council to ensure that you are not smothering these companies by your overrepresentation on the board and through your adversity of risk. If council isn't willing to allow these companies to make business decisions within the scope of the shareholder direction, then what is the true value of the board? I mean, that comes right out of the slides. How were these municipal service corporations able to flourish while the municipal service corporations are languishing and some might even suggest sliding backwards? Without the fullness of why certain decisions were made, it only leaves one to speculate that perhaps in the case of enterprises, the decision to burden the company with some executive leadership appointments, that's set out in 9, influencing the company's financial operations. Financial statements reveal that the company moved from profitability to loss. How and why that decision was made only leads to asking the question, what were those who were sitting on the board considering when they made those decisions? Was this a case of Municipal Administration Council deciding to shift some financial burden off town's administrative books onto the financial obligations of the companies? Whenever there are competing interests sitting at the board table, the interest of the town will supersede those of the corporation. Unless the board has independence, the simple answer is the town wins every time. That's why having the right people around the boardroom table is critically important and will provide for greater transparency. And this goes back 10 and 15 years. It's not just the board today. It's what you have governing your entities. Your consultants have done a good job at identifying the many shortcomings and challenges respecting each one of your companies, but they also provide you with a roadmap to begin the process of making the necessary changes. The efficiency and enhancement frameworks, which are on slides 14 to 26, begin to lay out a program that will help with council to get things back on track. Specifically, if you focus on the need to enhance the board governance, which is slide 17, again, read slide 17, it lays out several key considerations that will begin the process of renewal and support these companies and put them on the road towards success. In addition, there are several recommendations set out under the strategic growth options identified by Ernst & Young. We believe that there are some interesting opportunities for you as council to consider. However, let's also reflect upon history for a second and consider the rationale for why council of the day considered the concept of placing the water and wastewater services into a municipal service corporation. Yes, it was bold and creative and consistent with Innisfil's strategic plan. This move was intended to champion new partnerships and deliver critical infrastructure to Highway 400, its industrial employment lands corridor. There were discussions and potential opportunities for creative partnerships with others. Now, for those who were around, let's think back to the conversations regarding EPCOR. If our assertions are correct, EPCOR is a wholly owned utility company of the City of Edmonton. Interesting enough, the Edmonton City Council had the foresight to allow it to grow by appointing the right blend of skilled board members who made some strategic business decisions to pursue the vision and explore the business opportunities of the company. If you simply Google EPCOR, and I suggest you do, you will quickly learn that in 2023, EPCOR paid a dividend of $185 million to Edmonton. And since 1996, EPCOR has paid a total of $3.4 billion to the city through dividends. They are most likely the most successful municipal service corp in the country and now offer services throughout many Canadian and American jurisdictions. So rather than the bold strategic thinking, politics became a factor, and instead of looking outward, the town looked inward, and the prospect of servicing the 400 industrial lands failed to materialize. And we don't have sewers there now, and we won't have them there for at least 5 years. And Bradford has them, and Bradford has factories, and we don't have anything yet. They're coming, but there are problems. But let me be clear, The politics that I am speaking of isn't directly solely at the elected officials of the day. No, in large part, your administration got engaged into playing politics and killed that opportunity. So here we are almost a decade later, and unfortunately, your vision to service the 400 employment lands has yet to materialize. Let's not bury our heads in the sand. We need to be aware that our northern neighbor is currently in search of industrial employment lands in Tiny and in Oro, up there, where you can't move goods, especially on a Thursday or a Friday. You can't get through that traffic. There's no 400 bypass. It has to go on the 400. Barrie annexed Innisfil, the water sands lands, because we didn't use it, so we lost it. Now, how long before they start knocking on our door? Read the newspapers. So, Council, you have a choice to make. You can ignore the recommendations of your consultants. You can act upon them. You can recognize that acting upon the recommendation will require time, energy, and financial investment. However, not acting upon them will also have consequences and perpetuate our current challenges. Although we are supportive of many recommendations, we do have some concerns respecting those within the transformative and restructuring opportunities sections. Clearly pursuant, or some of these options, means that you are abandoning the vision and the opportunities that originally brought you to consider the creation of these companies. We concur with the very first recommendation in slide 36 that would set up a process of evaluation. If you were fortunate to attract the right skills-based board, along with some external support, this would be an early win and help provide a clear mandate to consider for the future. In the meantime, the prospect of looking at the sale of any of these companies should be placed on hold, in abeyance, until the early work has been completed. There's no rush to do this work. It's got to be done right. This report makes it clear that there are several organizational variations for municipal service corporations and hydro distributions. A made in Innisfil solution is clearly a desirable outcome for both council and this community. We will, however, continue to advocate for the need to engage all stakeholders in an all-open and transparent manner, regardless of the outcome. The development industry does have an important role to play in how our community grows and develops. We bring jobs and employment opportunities. And boy, I'd like to see them here in Innisfil so our kids don't have to leave. I don't want this community to be a bedroom community and hopping on a Metrolinx train and just leaving the town. That's not enough. We need employment, opportunities, investments in the community, and generate significant tax revenues to support the programs and services which you deliver. We are and we will continue to work in partnership with the town and your wholly owned utilities companies, and simply want to ensure that there continues to be a spirit of cooperation in our efforts to build a better Innisfil. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geist. Before I ask if there's any questions, we need a mover and a seconder to extend the time of the meeting. We are to be adjourned by 10 o'clock. Moved by Councillor Waters, seconded by Councillor Drodge. Any questions for Mr. Geist? Oh, did I not vote? All in favor? That's carried. All right. Now, is there any questions for Mr. Geese? Councillor Waters?
More of a comment than a question. I just want to thank you for your kind of interesting comments. And I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to board governance. I think I agree that the boards need to have more expertise that gets them to where they need to be. And just as an example, in services, we have 3 politicians and then a couple of other people from outside the agency. And I think they could do with some more expertise, and especially around the entrepreneurial for enterprises. They all need to have that expertise on it. So I wholeheartedly agree that the board, but I think the thing that our CAO did was he hired EY to give us this because we were just plodding along. And I think really in order to fend off Barrie and to give us those opportunity of jobs that we have the core to be able to do that with the utilities that we have. But like you said, I think the boards have to be a little more independent and be able to expand those opportunities for the town of Innisfil, because I think the benefits outweigh the benefits of keeping them together under maybe a different ownership model or organizational model really can bring those benefits, as the CEO, Danny, had mentioned earlier. So I think the opportunities are there, and I agree that, but we have a roadmap in front of us, which I think was good. So thank you very much for your comments. I really do appreciate them.
Thank you, sir. What you said does my heart good. I mean, Ernst & Young did an excellent report. And again, I've been on many boards, and as you know, I was past president of one board, and I leave that board in 2 months. And I had a meeting with the board the other day, and I did say, what is our mission statement? And what have you done? What have you accomplished? All right? And they really couldn't tell me. And they're very nice people. They're terrific people, and they mean well. But the name of the game is you have to produce. All right? And if you can't produce, then thank you for coming. Let me get somebody else. And in this case, I read this report, and it took me days to read it. It's intense. And I can't sit on an Empower board. You have to be an economist. All right? You have to be someone who's an engineer. All right? You have to be someone who's graduated from Ivy. All right? You need that type of people on the board. All right? They will set a mission statement, they will set direction, and the staff will run with it. And if the staff doesn't run with it, then you get new staff. But you have to have the governance in place to do the job.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Geese, for your presentation.
Thank you for the time.
I would
appreciate
ask, is there any other members of the public that are here who would like to present this evening? Is there anyone watching online, Madam Clerk, that would wish to make comments at this time?
Thank you, Worship. No, there are no other speakers for this evening.
Thank you. So a mover and a seconder, please, that the comments received in public consultation be received. Councillor Saunders, Deputy Mayor Fowler, all those in favor? That is carried. Now I'll go to quickly to CAO Gershow to make some closing remarks.
Thanks very much, Mayor Dolan. And I know it's been a long night, so I'll be brief, but I wanted to offer a couple comments for Council's benefit and for the community's benefit. I want to start by thanking everyone who spoke tonight. And in particular, I want to thank Danny for presenting on behalf of the management teams at the utility companies. And I guess I want to call out the challenge of being under the microscope as Danny and his teams have been through this utility review. It's not an easy position to be looked at and to be, have consultants come in and turn over the rocks and that sort of thing. And I think Danny, has managed himself and his team with great maturity and with collaboration. And I really appreciate that because I think this process is really important for the town. And it's a conversation that has to involve the utility companies. And I think it's really important for council to have had this opportunity to hear from Danny directly and to hear from everyone who spoke tonight. So really, you know, the last couple of weeks, last week's council meeting, tonight's council meeting, are very intentionally intended for you to be in the listening, you know, role, to hear the variety of perspectives that are out there. And, you know, we aren't finished yet. Obviously, the decision-making milestone is still in front of us. And, you know, I do want to promise that council will get advice and analysis from me and from town administration to support your decision-making, like you would with any other decision. And, you know, I've personally been waiting to see how the last couple of weeks have gone in order to confirm what that decision-making timeline is going to look like. You know, Mr. Nicol kind of raised the question around timing, and there really is a balancing act here, because I think, as you can all appreciate, there's a lot to unpack here. This is a very complex topic, a lot to think about before making a final decision. On the other hand, the utility companies and their boards, they must know where you stand. They really need to know so that they can get on with their business, whether that's developing strategic plans, you know, getting infrastructure in place, sorting out funding, you know, all of that really will be facilitated by having some clarity from council. So we do need to get on with it, but we don't want to rush it either. So I hope the last couple of weeks have helped you to think about what are the issues, what are the questions, and, you know, I'm certainly committing to help you through this process and getting to the finish line, because I think, as I said last week, one of the real fundamentals here is for council to simply be clear about its objectives for these companies, because all the, you know, options and, you know, pages and pages of report, they really boil down to some fairly basic beliefs about what these companies are for and what you'd like to see them do. So I have some ideas about how to help get us there. And like I said, I'll close reiterating the thanks to Danny and to all the speakers tonight for contributing their comments. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Gershow. And with that, I will ask for a mover and a seconder, please, for the confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Eisses, seconded by Councillor Constantine. All those in favor? That is carried. And mover and a seconder to adjourn, please, at 10:16 p.m. Moved by Councillor Drodge, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? Thank you very much, Council. This is really our first very late evening. And hopefully it doesn't happen very often, but appreciate you taking the time. Good night, everyone, and see you next week.